So I'll call us to order. Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, December 7th, 2021 meeting of the Ann Arbor Planning Commission. This meeting is being held electronically to protect public health and safety due to the COVID-19 virus and to comply with orders issued by the governor, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and or the Washtenaw County Health Department. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues. To speak during public comment opportunities, you'll be able to speak through the webinar link or by phone, depending on your method of access to this meeting and the devices you have available to you. Both the phone number and the web link are available on the published agenda, which is in the public notices section of the city website. For phone access tonight, if you are watching us and want to call in, the dial-in number is 877-853-5247, and then you enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. This information is also available on the published agenda, which I noted is on the city's website, and it's on the broadcast of the meeting on CTN Channel 19 and online at a2gov.org/watchctn, and you'd select the government channel. Item 2 is our roll call. Mr. Leonard, could you please assist me with that?
I would be happy. Commissioner Mills.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Gibrandel.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Abrams.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Also here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Dish.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Lee.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Clark.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Weich.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Glad you are. Our full quorum is at home and cozy and warm.
It's bitter out there tonight, huh? All right, number 3 is the approval of the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Commissioner Lee, seconded by Commissioner Abrams. Any discussion of the motion? All in favor, please raise a hand or say yes. I see all the hands. The motion carries. Item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of 2 meetings, revisions to October 19th, 2021 and November 4th, 2021. Moved by Commissioner Hammerschmidt, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandel. Are there any discussion of either of those sets of minutes? Great. All in favor of the motion, please raise a hand or say yes. That's all hands. Very good. The motion carries. Item 5 are all of the reports. Councilmember Dish, do you have a report for us from last night?
I do, and I might not be remembering everything, but the big news is that the site review thresholds were passed on first reading. So there will be a public hearing and probably a fair amount of discussion at the second time, but I think there was a really good discussion of this last night with a lot of understanding about what motivated us and how it will, how we're facilitating small and medium-sized projects, and how really how we can trust the Planning Commission to work over these site plans as we do and get the benefits out of them for the community that we need, and it doesn't need to go to council. So I thought that was a good discussion last night, and not of direct interest, but I'm sure of interest to all of you, is that we did approve the Community Climate Action Millage. It will be on the ballot in November. And so please vote, please ask all your friends to vote. And I'm not campaigning, I'm offering public information, sorry. And I can't remember if there was anything else of special interest to planning.
I can take it from there. There was one other item, the approval of 106 North 4th, the site plan for the modest addition on the downtown development was approved as well. And then the last thing that I'll just, for my report is in the working session for next week, we have a pre-PUD petition meeting with the Planning Commission for 415 West Washington. This is one of the sites that the City Council has instructed the Housing Commission and city staff to pursue as potential redevelopment and affordable housing sites.
Very good, thank you. Do any other commissioner officers or committee liaisons have anything to report out? Commissioner Gibrandl.
From the DDA partners, I thought I might just give you a few updates on some of the different downtown projects they have going on with roads, especially as it relates to some of the things around bike lanes and things like that. A division is nearly done, so that's exciting that we're going to have a protected bike lane there. Along Williams, there's going to be, they're revising some things in there, and you may have seen some barricades up and stuff like that. So that's going to be, they're going to have a removable curb in part of it so that art fair can more seamlessly fit in with that. State Street is currently being redesigned, and there's lots of meetings and public input going on with that. So that's another thing that people can weigh in on. And then Miller and Catherine are under redesign right now too. And I know, again, as we're thinking about transit and alternative ways of getting around town, that those might be of interest to people as we, have things come in. And then the other thing is we got a really nice long presentation on the transportation plan and the different scenarios that might come out of that. And, obviously that relates a lot to kind of how we're thinking about things with E20 and with TC1 and things like that. So that's still in kind of, probably towards the tail end of public input right now. But there's a lot on their website if people want to know more. Yeah, that's I think pretty much it in terms of things that relate directly. Thanks.
Any others? I'll report out that ORC did meet 2 weeks ago. Last week was a fifth Tuesday, so we had the week off, and talked about the parking regulations. Mr. Leonard gave us a couple of different scenarios in terms of things that staff were thinking of. So that is moving incrementally forward. All right. Seeing no other hands or committee liaisons, I'll move on then to item 6, which is audience participation. This is next is an opportunity for public comment. It's an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about an issue that's not listed as a public hearing on this agenda. So for tonight, we'll be holding dedicated public hearings on 3 items: the Village of Ann Arbor annexation, the capital improvements plan, and the Ann Arbor Chinese Christian Church and special exception use permit. If you'd like to address Planning Commission on any other matter, now is an appropriate time to speak. If you've already dialed in, you can press *9 on your phone. If you've joined us through the web link, you can use the raised hand button, which is located at the center bottom of your screen. If you are watching us and need to dial in or want to dial in now, you can call 877-853-5247 and then enter our meeting ID, which is 977-6634-1226. Mr. Leonard will call on those who have raised your hand. Again, you do that by pressing *9 or using the raised hand button. And he'll call on you by name if you've joined through the web link, or the last 3 digits of your telephone number if you joined by phone. You'll hear an automated announcement when it's your turn to speak. Please move to a quiet area and mute any background sound, including television, so that we can hear you clearly. And please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Hopefully I gave enough time for the TV delay. Again, *9.
I don't see any indications of speakers.
All right, then we will move on to item number 7 and just letting people know there's an opportunity at the end of the meeting too to call in if you so desire. Item 7 are the public hearings for the next business meeting.
No new public hearings are scheduled for the December 21st Planning Commission meeting.
Well, hot dog. We'll see if anything gets carried over, but let's try to get through. Okay. Item then we're on to regular business. 8A is the Village of Ann Arbor annexation for City Council approval. As the development team comes in, I will give the little blurb out on this. This is a request to annex a number of parcels from Ann Arbor Township into the city of Ann Arbor. The total acreage is 65 acres. The agenda references rezoning, but this recommendation won't be considered this evening. The rezoning is to come with a future site plan. So it sounds like we're just talking about annexation, and we're talking about properties on Pontiac Trail and Duvarin. So Mr. Leonard is moving kind of the development team and planning staff in. Our normal procedure is to have 10 minutes for the petitioner to make a presentation. And then Mr. Khan can provide staff's presentation. Then we'll have the public hearing before our discussion.
Tim, will you be doing a visual presentation?
Yes, if I can share my screen, that'd be great.
Okay, one moment.
All right. Is there anybody else that needs to come in? You're seeing everybody on your team?
Yeah, I believe so. Thank you.
All right. So whenever you are ready to start, we'll start the clock.
Great, thank you. So I'm Tim Loughran. I'm the Director of Land Acquisition for Robertson Brothers Homes. Nice to see you. Thank you for your time today. We have some of our partners as well. Brett Stuntz from SME and John Woods from DTN Management. We also have Atwell Group is our engineer on the project. First of all, just want to thank you for your time. I'm a fellow planning commissioner, and I know that you do not get thanked often. So I appreciate your time this evening. If it's okay, since I'm already into my 10 minutes, I'm going to share my screen. And my address for the record is 6905 Telegraph Road in Bloomfield Hills. So we're very excited to be here tonight. It's been a long road already. It's a large parcel of land. We're about 65 acres or so. And it is technically in the township today, obviously. So we're looking for an annexation and then the rezone and site plan to follow. So we're calling the development the Village of Ann Arbor. If anybody's familiar, also probably know it as the Brewer property. It's also, there's also an assemblage of land with the Mann family, the Dufek family, and the Summers family. The Summers property is actually already in the city. It is at basically the southeast corner of Duvarin and Pontiac Trail. Just quickly on the project summary. And what we're really looking for here is more of a vision for a village concept, hence the name Village of Ann Arbor. And I'm happy to share some of these components. Again, we're not looking for site plan tonight, just the annexation, but I think it's helpful to show you the project in and of itself. 67 gross acres. There is a landfill on the property, which is why it's been sitting there for so long, about 9 acres or so. We are not looking to do anything in that landfill area. It's treed. If you go out there, you wouldn't even know it's a landfill. We're looking to keep that area natural and develop around that. So it's about 56 net acres. The master plan density is designated for 7 to 10 units per acre. We're proposing 564 total homes. And that's a mix of for sale, single family, attached homes and townhomes, and then also a highly amenitized apartment community, which I'll go into a little bit of detail. Unit sizes, it really does range quite a bit from 684 all the way up to 1,850 square feet, anywhere from 1 to 3 bedrooms. We really wanted to have a number of price points and different options for home buyers. So the village concept, it really provides for multiple entry points in pricing. This is what's really important to us. We want to have a lot of different options for those that are in the new home market or the rental market. We will have multiple open space areas. This is very important to us. So we'll have different pods within the village, and those different pods will have open space areas, and then they'll be all interconnected. So this is something we've really concentrated on. In addition to that, we're going to have neighborhood connections from Olson Park to the north to Leslie Park to our east, and we'll be providing vehicular access to Leslie Park, whereas right now there's only access through a private subdivision. Duvarn on the Park, I think, is the name of the subdivision. So this would open that up. They would be private roads. We would allow, we would basically have a public access easement for anybody to access Leslie Park. And we would have the walking and biking trails. We are proposing potentially, if the environmentals permit it, to have trails through the previous landfill area, which again is a very well-treated amenity in our minds. We believe it's an appropriate mix of land uses. It's all residential, but it really runs the gamut from high quality rental with smaller units to larger units, and then smaller townhomes, for sale townhomes, larger townhomes, and then what we call an attached single family. Feels like a single family home, they are attached. The use of the site, it basically is a reclamation of, as I mentioned, the previous landfill property. We're going to clean up a lot of that. There's methane on the site that we'll be remediating. There's just a lot that we're doing in regards to cleaning up the land, which again, there's a reason why so much land has been sitting there for so long. So we've tackled it, and we spent a couple of years, by the way, analyzing the site. We're providing for family-oriented plans, and then we'll also have the high-quality owner-occupied homes and amenitized apartment homes. And just a little shameless self-promotion. I'll get to this in a second here, but Robertson Brothers Homes, we've done a little bit in Ann Arbor. It's been a while since we've been in the area. But I would put our reputation up against anyone. Ask around. You can see our projects around. We do we've got about 15 active sites right now that we're either delivering, in the middle of delivering, or are closing out. So we're very active. And DTN is as well. John Woods is on. Any questions for DTN? But they've been around for a very long time as well. So you've got a good team here, and I think that's important because it shows you've got a couple of developers here that are going to see this through and do what's right for the property and the community. Just quickly on experience, I don't want to go too far into this, but we've been around a very long time. Robertson Brothers has been around over 75 years. We've built a lot of homes. And again, I think if you ask around, I believe we have the best reputation in the market. We've got about 1,200 homes in our land acquisition pipeline. So we're going to be around for a while. And what we really like is to build infill type of communities where it's walkable. It's something unique to the property, vibrant. That's what we look for. We do not build out in the cornfields like other home builders. So this is right up our alley, and we're very excited about the site. Our partners, DTN, we're partnering 50-50 on the project. They're privately held. They've been around for a very long time as well, 50 years. They've got a lot of properties as well, Lansing, Grand Rapids, all over the state. And looks like they've developed over 8,000 residential units. So we reached out to them. We think they're a very quality apartment partner for us. Just a little bit of site context. I'm sorry if this is difficult to read, but I wanted to show where we fit in. So if you see, you can see M14 to the left, which is west. Our basically left or western boundary is Pontiac Trail, the north-south, and then the east-west on the top is Duvarn. We do not have much connection to either of those streets. Most of our land is in the center, as you can see. But what I think really this points out is we're really matching the density of the overall area. Some of those are blurred, as you can see. I've got an overlay on it. But there's quite a bit of density in this area, townhomes and that and such. So we think we're fitting in from a density standpoint. And you can also see from here, you can see the connections to Leslie Park, which is on the right of our site, the east side of our site. That'll be a new connection to the park, whereas there was no connection really other than going through that private subdivision there. So we think these are really good amenities for the overall area, not just our project. And that's something we're very proud of. So again, that's the overall Olson Park to the north. I don't know if I mentioned that. This is the site concept plan. I apologize if it's a little blurry. Essentially, the larger units on the south, those are the DTN rental units. I believe there is about 320 of those units. And that's really on the southern end of our site. So that east-west connector, that's a new road we'll be building from Pontiac Trail connecting to Leslie Park. And then the north-south spine that goes to the north of that goes out to Duvarn. And everything essentially on the north side of that is a for sale product, ranging from smaller townhomes to larger townhomes to this attached single family, and also what we call towns over flats, which allows some ranch style units on the first floor, which we think would be a really good product for this area.
A minute to go, Tim.
How much?
About a minute.
Okay, I'll hurry it up. Just quickly, this is the example of some of the townhomes. This would be more on the western portion. This is what we built on the Old Tiger Stadium recently. This is the Towns Over Flat building on Duvarn. So there'd be multiple buildings of that. Again, townhomes over on the first floor would be ranches. They'd have covered parking. These would be the attached single family units, about 1,850 square feet, 3 bedrooms. So it really feels like a single family home, again, for sale. Just pictures of the quality we do. If you go to any of our Robertson models, I think you'd find that quality throughout. And then DTN's product, again, on the south side of the project, very high quality, very high end, nice amenities. The amenities that we're providing here in the clubhouse and the pool, those would be shared for everybody in our community. So the for sale and the rental, which I think is really interesting and unique potential for our home buyers. There's some pictures of what DTN does. And I think that is my last slide. So any questions? I am very happy to answer, and I'll put it back on the site plan.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Khan, you have a staff report for us, and actually probably will stop sharing this screen if you will.
Sure, of course.
We'll come back to it, I'm sure.
Yes.
Mr. Mills, I don't have a lot to add to the proposal. It's a site that is very interesting from a number of standpoints. It has some challenges that the petitioner is attempting to mitigate and address. It's also located in an area with a substantial amount of parkland. Leslie Park, the very substantial Leslie Park, is located immediately to the east. Olson Park is located pretty much immediately to the north, and the Foxfire system of parks is also nearby. So we look forward to bringing this petition to you, hopefully fairly soon, where you can contemplate the proposed R4 a zoning district as well as the proposed site plan. That's all I have.
All right. We can open then the public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the proposed annexation. If you wish to address the Planning Commission on this item and you've dialed in, press *9 on your phone. If you've joined us through the web link, you can use the raised hand button. For phone access, if you're watching us, our call-in number is 877-853-5247, and the meeting ID is 977-6634-1226. Mr. Leonard will call on those who have raised their hand. You do that, again, if you've called in by pressing *9. If you've joined us through the web link, through the raised hand button. He'll call on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number or by your name if you've joined through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. Please move to a quiet area and mute any background sound, including the television, so that we can hear you clearly. And please also state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
Caller with the phone number ending with 134. You can unmute. There you go. You have 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard and Chair Mills. I'm Ken Garber, 28 Haverhill Court, Ann Arbor. I know this is an annexation, not a site plan, but the village is a huge project, so it's not too early to bring up some design considerations, as Mr. Loughran did. One is building electrification. This is more a building issue than a planning or zoning issue, but Planning Commission, to its credit, has addressed it in the past. I assume Mr. Loughran and his development team know by now that the city's 820 plan includes the following assumption, quote, all new residential and commercial buildings are designed and built to operate without the use of natural gas, reducing the increased costs associated with retrofitting existing systems, end quote. We don't yet require this, but recently approved large all-electric residential projects here with air source heat pumps include Valhalla Glen, Viridian, 2111 Packard, and Lockwood Senior Living. Those developers told us that electrification adds only an incremental additional cost, if any, to new construction. And modern heat pumps are very efficient, minimizing the difference in utility bills, which is narrowing anyway as the price of natural gas rises. Making the village all electric will avoid major emissions. Let me quantify that. In 2019, the average annual gas consumption per household in Michigan was 103 million BTUs. That's 100,000 cubic feet of gas, or 1,000 therms. At 13 kilograms CO2 equivalent emissions per therm, a conversion factor that takes into account upstream emissions, that comes to 13 metric ton CO2 emissions per household per year, just from burning gas. Multiply that by these 564 units, and you get 7,300 metric ton CO2 per year. That would be a 1.7% addition to the city's current total residential emissions. That's 7,300 tons every year for at least 75 years. And CO2 stays in the atmosphere for centuries. Another consideration is fiscal. For the city to achieve carbon neutrality, it'll need to offset those emissions. I don't like offsets, but they're in the 820 plan. The highest quality offsets are currently priced at $47 per metric ton CO2. So this project with gas will cost taxpayers about $343,000 a year to offset. And by 2035, it will need to be retrofitted anyway with heat pumps, because that's the last year by which rich countries like ours must fully decarbonize in order to keep to 1.5 degrees global heating based on IPCC carbon budgets. The village stands out because it's so big, but the same principle applies to all new projects. The forced air gas furnace is a technology that no longer has any role in residential new construction. Not in a world where atmospheric CO2 is at 420 parts per million and still rising fast. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 534. Caller with the phone number ending with 534. You have 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
Good evening. This is Tom Stallberg calling from Lower Town in Ann Arbor. It's nice to see this property come in for annexation. I'm going to talk about more than just the annexation, because it's hard to just do that with this property. It's nice to see that this project is meeting the existing comprehensive plan, as some others have not recently. Something to consider in this area, the area was planned for a certain level of density with the anticipation of not having traditional single-family homes and just a lot of two-car commuters driving into town. And that relies a lot on transportation, alternate forms of transportation. And we haven't seen that addressed yet as we've seen other developments coming in. And we know there's been a lot of new development in Pontiac Trail, Duvarn, Nixon corridor. And we know AAATA has made some presentations recently about what they could do for increased service that relies on substantial millage increases as well, though. So as you evaluate this project, please contemplate how we can achieve the density that this was planned for with the transportation needs. So we don't just have a lot of commuters getting in their cars and driving in, which was the whole purpose of planning this for higher density. And some of their designs do certainly meet that differentiation. So I appreciate the developers' variety of design that has an eye towards that. While we're looking at this, there's also R1E across the street in the Pulte development. I believe that's the only built R1E project. There was another one that was approved, but that was never built. And I think that R1E went away with a consent judgment, if I'm not mistaken. There's been calls before to evaluate R1E and see how it's working and not working. I think this would be a good time to contemplate that. Do we want it on our books or not? I don't believe this developer is proposing that, but I'm not positive because this is just annexation at this point. So overall, this looks like a very good project that is meeting the plan, the comprehensive land use plan for the area, and I hope to see all these issues at least talked about. Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone else would like to participate in the public hearing, if you've dialed in, you can press *9 on your phone. If you have joined us through the web link, you can use the raised hand feature.
See no additional speakers.
All right, very well then. I will close the public hearing and read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the annexation of 1680 Duvarin Road, 2670 Pontiac Trail, 2672 Pontiac Trail, 2678 Pontiac Trail, and 2682 Pontiac Trail. Moved by Commissioner Abrams, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. Discussion of the proposed motion? Anybody want to kick us off? Commissioner Abrams.
Thank you. I was hoping that either Mr. Leonard or Mr. Khan could review kind of consideration for annexation. So since this is not about the site plan or the zoning, I think it would help me as a matter of process to clarify what things we should take into account when we're thinking about annexation. Thanks.
I'm happy to start off, Commissioner Abrams, and then Brett can jump in if you like. With regard to considerations, I think one thing to consider is the agreement that we have with Ann Arbor Township, which was signed in, I believe, 1994, which spells out the ability for a private property owner to petition for annexation into the city of Ann Arbor in order to obtain city utilities like water and sanitary. And that agreement says that the township will not contest the annexation. So it is what is being proposed now is consistent with that agreement. So I would think that that agreement would be one thing to consider. Another thing to consider would be the availability of water and sanitary, which both of which are available. So I would say that those are the two things that come into mind for me at this stage of the process, which is just to review the annexation. Let me pause to see if Brett had anything else he wanted to add.
No, the only thing I would sort of add that is just a different way of framing, I think what Jeff has already stated is that in those agreements with the surrounding township, including in this case Ann Arbor Township, this area is part of our planned utility service area. So in considering annexation of that property, that is part of an ultimate geography that the city has counted on providing those services to. The annexation obviously not only opens up the opportunity for those services to be provided to that, but also brings that land into accessibility for all of the benefits that are available to properties within the city.
Commissioner Dish.
I realize that we're just considering the annexation and it seems a pretty straightforward case. I really appreciate the design of this proposal and I appreciate the diversity of housing options. If it isn't inappropriate, I would like to carry a couple of things forward from the public meeting that happened on this. I can't remember if it was this summer or when it was in COVID blur time. If that's not appropriate, please tell me so I don't keep us here any later than we need to be, if I'm quick. Okay, I see from Chair Mills, it's okay. So I just wanted to say, following up on Ken Garber's comments, that at the public meeting on this property, we talked about how, since it is a village concept, since it is a pretty expansive development and a nicely dense development, it would be great if you all would explore the options for electrification, and in particular, checking into whether geothermal is possible for you and cost effective for this site, since you are servicing so many homes. That might be a realistic way to approach it. Otherwise, certainly electric appliances at a minimum. HVAC would be ideal. Heating would be ideal. The other thing that I wanted to raise, delighted to see that you're going to be providing this alternate entry to Leslie Park that will come off of Pontiac. That's going to take some pressure off that private association, which is not happy with the traffic that it gets, I can tell you. And I'd love it if you would be sure to consider to make both of those streets that you're putting in complete streets, because this is an area where folks bike because there's so many parks. And so we want to make sure that the streets that you're putting in not only have sidewalks, but that they have biking amenities. This is also a part of town, which I live in, that has incomplete or less generous than I would like bus service. And so a lot of folks really do bike up Pontiac and into town. It's a really short and reasonable bike trip. And so we'd want to make sure that your village supports and encourages that option. And then the final thing, which I'm not sure if, also, please be sure to build covered bike storage for the apartment portion of the property, because you're going to have a lot of units there. And I don't know what the garage situation will be for those units. And also, people don't like to carry their bicycles upstairs. So making sure that you have covered bike parking there would be really superb. And then just finally, we are seeing such a traffic load on Pontiac, and there is nothing to stop the traffic between US 23 and Barton Drive. So though the speed limits decrease and people are supposed to slow down, people actually whip through there at very fast speeds. At a minimum, I would love to see a four-way stop at the Duvar and Pontiac intersection, which is your intersection. In my wildest dreams, I would love to see a little roundabout, but I'm not sure. Obviously, I'm not a traffic person, so I'm not sure that that's feasible or warranted. But this will be the third really kind of big development within a few blocks up there on Pontiac. And so we really are seeing a lot more traffic. And I'm really hoping that we can do something to help control the speeds, because the folks who live in Arrowwood, and then there's one other housing association immediately south of Arrowwood on that same side of Pontiac, they can't get out of their driveway in the morning. They can't get on the Pontiac Trail during the peak traffic times. Because there's just such a flow of cars. And a lot of the folks who live in the relatively expensive, really nice homes that are right across the street, right across Pontiac from where you're developing, they do drive. They drive to the hospital, they drive to the university. So anything that we can do to take the load off our neighbors in Arrowwood would be really lovely, by at least just providing a break in traffic.
Other planning commissioners, Commissioner Clark.
Okay, so thanks for bringing this forward. I agree. It looks like it has a lot of really strong attributes to it. I live on Pontiac Trail, directly on it, right at, down the street from this will be a new neighbor. I want to second what what Commissioner Dish said about wanting to try and provide alternative transport downtown. It is a really short bike ride down into town. It's really straightforward. It's just traffic speeds. I've never we're directly on Pontiac Trail. I've never had it so bad that we can't back out of our driveway. I have to say it's something I've not experienced, but I can definitely say that there has been a massive increase in vehicle traffic. So I know it's kind of like a bigger picture thing, but I agree with the need for there to be better bike infrastructure, potentially a roundabout at Juvarin, and anything like the shuttle buses I've seen from another development have been going up and down Pontiac Trail that seem to be pretty well utilized. So I think there's a lot of room to explore there, and looking forward to seeing this progress.
Other commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Hammerschmidt and then Commissioner Gibrandl.
Thanks. This should be quick. So I'm just trying to keep these things separate in my head, the annexation and then the site plan. So the annexation, so this is more of a, I think, a process question for staff. So we approve the annexation, something happens with the site plan, God forbid, because I think this looks like a great project. It's still annexed into the city, is that correct? Like nothing changes with that. We're going to bring it into the city, and then whatever happens with the property in future dates happens with the property.
Yeah, it's a good question. It would become in the city, and we can't take any site plan action or zoning action on any property until it is part of the city jurisdiction. In the event that it were annexed and something happened to the site plan, probably at some point, then staff would come to the Planning Commission and City Council with a recommendation for zoning in an interim basis to memorialize a set of regulations that would be appropriate for this property. So
it's coming annexed without zoning.
Annexation is the first step. So this typically you will see when this happens with single family properties, for example, we often present both the recommended zoning and the annexations to the Planning Commission at this time. Given the complexity of this and the time associated with that, we have worked with this petitioner to consider the annexation first so that can proceed to the City Council, to the state of Michigan. That because we can't take action on that site plan and zoning until such a time that that's complete. So if this proposal would not to proceed, but it is successfully annexed by the state of Michigan, moved from the township to the city, we would then as staff come in and propose a zoning absent a site plan at that, again, just to apply regulations to this property for future consideration.
I think that's really helpful. And this is probably in the staff report. I apologize. How long does the annexation process take? Like, what are we looking at in terms of timeline? Depends on the state.
Yeah, sometimes it's quick and sometimes it's long. Jeff, do you have a sense of average?
Brett's correct on that. It's hard for us to say. We get a sense that the Office of the Great Seal may review these in batches. It's actually an engineer from MDOT that does the review to make sure that the legal descriptions close. And so it may be as fast as a month or two, or it might be 3 to 4 months. So we typically like to get the annexation going so it doesn't hold up the whole process. But yeah, it's hard to say, typically 1 to 4 or 5 months.
Okay, we'll just cross our fingers for speedier. Thanks.
Commissioner Gibrandl.
I know that there was a transportation study in the works for this area. Could staff let us know kind of where that is in the process and how that may or may not coincide with the development here in terms of possible recommendations and things like that?
Jeff, do you want to go ahead and address that?
I can start off. Yes, there is a transportation study that started off, I think, being called the Lower Town Transportation Study, that is looking at sort of all the systems that are coming into the Lower Town area, since there are a lot of major transportation facilities come into that area, and it's looking up the Pontiac Trail corridor to DeBarn to determine what types of systems might make sense. Brad and I meet with a group of folks from our public services area every quarter to get an update on where we stand. We were not able to meet last quarter, but we are meeting next week, so we'll actually be able to have more information next week. But that's pretty much what I know in terms of where they are, and I believe that they're going to be wrapping this up within the next few months. Brad, did you have anything to add?
No, that's my, I was actually just looking for the last update I received from our transportation department, and I can't find it, but I'm under the impression that they are close, like early next year, they were going to be presenting sort of recommendations and any conclusions publicly. I can follow up with the commission with a more sort of helpful and detailed analysis if that's what the schedule is anticipated and what the steps of rolling out that information is. But in short, that analysis I think is coming to a close. I think recommendations will be presented shortly. And if not completed, the traffic engineers who will be reviewing this proposal will have the benefit of most of that work being completed as they consider the any traffic mitigation impacts that would be necessary as part of this development.
That would be really helpful, I think, because as Commissioner just said, I mean, this corridor has really just been, there's been a lot in a short period of time, and the whole area that it dumps into is right near my work, and it's just it's a mess down in that area. And so I would be very, it affects the immediate area, but it also affects these zones outside of it too. And I would really like to have the benefit of the recommendations from that. I'm glad that it looks like it's possible to be able to get some of that information before the next iteration of that comes through, because I would really be looking to that study to understand what some of our possibilities are for this. I would also like to just echo the desire to, this is a lot of homes, and this is a real opportunity for us to be able to really make a difference in terms of sustainability. And I would really like to see the developer embrace that. And because this is, I think we need the housing. I'm very supportive of all of that, but I would love to see you all really rise to that challenge, because I feel like we just have a huge opportunity here. And there's just looking at the history of this site, this is pretty much big open farmland for a long time. There's no like big old woods and things like that there as much as there have been on other parcels. And so you have a lot of wide open, and in terms of like solar access and things like that, it would be great to really have you thinking about how to fine tune things to be able to make your development set up to engage some of the practices that we are really encouraging people to consider. And I know that we don't have the ultimate leverage to kind of make you do things, but boy, it's so much easier for us to be supportive if we see you not dragging your feet on it, but leading with it. And it's a real opportunity that I would love to see you be a leader on, because I think that combining that with some of the other amenities that you have would really, I think that, frankly, I think the market here likes it. So that's something for you to think about too, is that it's not just what us on Planning Commission, what we're saying, but it's a whole populace of people that are interested in this stuff. And I think that we're seeing that in some other developments around town that are engaging it, and they are getting people to sign up for this and who are interested in it. And so I really see it as an opportunity for you to extend your market reach in some ways too, in terms of who you might attract. So, I'm sure because of the size of your organizations and things like that, you are doing all kinds of market research and do your research on kind of who Ann Arbor is, because it's not necessarily Birmingham, in terms of what people are interested in. And I think that it's not just a have to, but I think it's a want to in terms of what a lot of people here are interested in terms of buying things. So I think you have an opportunity there too to attract, a different kind of buyer. It's close to town. You really can bike from here in a real way. I do it along this area because my work, and I think you have real opportunities there that make it like actually viable. That would really be exciting to see. So thanks. It looks really interesting and good. So please continue along that road, and it would be great if you can consider some of the things that we're bringing up.
Sure, thanks. We understand.
Mr. Leonard, I saw if you want to jump in.
Yeah, thank you. Because the city's transportation engineer, Luke Liu, is awesomely responsive. The Lower Town traffic study report is in its staff review phase. We're anticipating a release of that in January or February of next year. But what that means is all of the data that has been analyzed and the development, this project will be fully benefited from the work that was done in that report. That's not an if, it will benefit from it. So
great. I see commissioners lined up. I think it is helpful for the petitioner to hear thoughts, but I encourage us to be brief since we still have a full lineup and it is almost 8 o'clock. Commissioner Dish and Commissioner Clark, super brief since you've already have already spoken, and then Commissioner Weich.
Yes, super briefly. I looked in my notes. Of course, this hasn't been staff reviewed, but at a briefing on the Lower Town traffic study, they recommend a roundabout at Duvarin and Pontiac. A light is warranted, they say, but a roundabout will do a better job of slowing people down. So that was a briefing in September. We don't know what staff will do with that.
Commissioner Weich, go ahead.
Oh, I thought you were going to go to Commissioner Clark.
You're first on my list.
No, okay.
Commissioner Clark, you're
Is that
next.
okay? My question is just about the annexation. So going back to that, if the petitioner still has their slides available, could you show me on your overview where the landfill is? I don't know that was marked anywhere. And if it was, I'm sorry that I missed it.
I'm seeing your cursor there to the upper right side. Is that right?
It should be sharing my. You see now?
Yeah,
we can.
Yes, so it is the area that says wooded open space with potential natural trail. So this is around. You can see my cursor over it. It's about 8 to 10 acres.
And then for staff or Mr. Leonard, I was just struck by Commissioner Hammerschmidt's question around the annexation process. So if we approve the annexation, but the petitioner for some reason doesn't do the development, and now the land is annexed in the city, do we, the city, bear any responsibility for any of the pollutants that may be present in the landfill, to remediate that, to clean that, to address any of that?
No, the regulations around environmental conditions are actually statewide. So the standards and measures by which they are evaluated are state standards. They are not city standards. In fact, annexing the property into the city, not that avenue would be closed to Ann Arbor Township, but the city is a member of the Washtenaw County Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. So it probably actually adds more tools should a remediation be considered. And that is a dialogue we are having with this petitioner about a potential brownfield plan to assist with that work. That'll be considered ultimately by the city if they choose to pursue that option as well.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Clark.
Just a quick comment that I just want to make sure it was clear earlier when I say with Pontiac Trail, I think it's a corridor that's really well positioned for density. The extra traffic on the road, I don't think so much is like a problem of like having a new development, all the new developments. It's actually like was mentioned before, this has been land that really has been needing some abatement. It's been kind of just sitting there for forever. And I do think that the sustainability aspects of like all electric, that would be kind of a nice like bonus and everything. But I guess from my perspective, I'm really excited to see this project move forward for one, the density, and then that it is just a straight shot down Pontiac, and that's kind of more of a city issue, and that we can deliver these services pretty efficiently since this area is already, and it seems like a no-brainer to the annexation, and yeah, really looking forward to this one.
Any other commissioners? I'll chime in concurring with what others have said about sustainability features, complete streets on the way to the park. I have gotten lost on my way to try to figure out how to get to that park. So I think that that would be fantastic. Also, just to be very clear, I'm excited by the number of units here, and I would encourage as many units as possible, particularly if that helps your pro forma mean that you can reinvest that in sustainability in this area. I mean, this is what the comprehensive plan calls for. This is one of, we keep on saying this, but this really is one of the last few large properties in town where this will happen. And so I hope that this becomes a village. I think that this is a great opportunity. So please do not be at the low end of that band. And please certainly do not undershoot the number of housing units that we can get in this particular area. So.
Understood. Thanks.
Any others? All right, Mr. Leonard, I think we're ready for a roll call then.
Okay, let's start with Commissioner Dish.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
Yes.
Commissioner Weich.
Yes.
Commissioner Gibrandal.
Yes.
Commissioner Sauve.
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yes.
Carries unanimously.
Very good. We'll look forward to seeing you when you come back for rezoning and site plan.
Thank you. We look forward to coming back soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is 8A or 8B, sorry. This is the fiscal year 2023 to 2028 Capital Improvements Plan, or CIP. As Mr. Leonard moves folks in and out of the kind of discussion chamber, again, the CIP is comprised of updated financial data for fiscal year 2023 projects that were already in the fiscal year 2022 to 2027 CIP, and there's changes to some project schedules and a few additions. So this is a city effective initiative, and so we'll start with a presentation by Ms. Goslin, and then we'll have the public hearing.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to be brief tonight. So the plan is covering fiscal years 23 to 28. However, the focus tonight is on fiscal 23 primarily, and 22, the current year, as it affects 23. You all have had a copy of the draft in your packets. It was also available, the draft, to the public in a couple of places, both through the systems planning CIP website, and then of course through the attachments to the agenda for tonight's meeting. And for your convenience and the public's, we just use simple colors to help highlight where things had changed. And we look at projects in the 22-23 window where the schedule changed, or the dollars needed changed, or both. And then also a very small number of new projects would have been added. We basically do not make changes to the outer years. And this keeps us in alignment with the upcoming fiscal 23 capital budget that council will next consider in the early months of next year, 22. So just some very quick highlights. There were 206 projects active in 22 or 23, and we're adding 19 new projects. 4 are getting eliminated, and then some moved in and out of the window. So the net number of active projects is 217 in this proposed plan. So not much of a change in that regard. Dollar-wise, the original funding need in the current plan for 23 specifically was approximately $111.4 million. The total adjusted funding proposed for fiscal 23 is approximately $97.6 million. So that's a decrease of about 13.8 million, which amounts to about a 12% decrease. And, you know, when I first crunched the number, I'm like, wow, it seems like everything's going up, and yet that number went down. And certainly when you look at funding adjustments, you're going to see a lot of individual project costs went up. However, there were 4 things that I highlighted for you, and we'll just go through very briefly since this is a public hearing, that had big dollar implications that affected this window. The first thing was Housing Commission projects. As you know, with the passage of the local Housing Commission millage, the city has a very ambitious plan for converting city-owned properties such as surface lots to become affordable housing projects. However, due to lots of things going on, you know, COVID-related things happening on state level, the planning and design is being pushed back a bit on 3 of the larger projects. And that had the effect of taking some large construction spends out of 23. So that was probably this, you know, single biggest contributor to that decrease. Again, the projects aren't proposed to change. They're just not going to be ready to move to construction. And that was very significant. The second thing is parking facilities. Of course, we've now been through 2020 and 21, in which a lot of us are still telecommuting. So revenues for parking facilities downtown have been down. So if your money's down, your expenditures need to go down also. So the capital maintenance on the parking facilities, this was not nearly as big a change as the Housing Commission, but it did result in roughly a $2.5 million decrease across all the facilities. Now, bear in mind, they're also not taking as much wear and tear because there aren't as many people in them. So that will catch back up, but that's one of the contributors to the decrease. A third thing that I highlighted was the train station project, when last seen, was thinking it would start into final design in 23, but it can't proceed without federal approval on the previous step, which they refer to as NEPA PE. That has not yet been forthcoming. So the 4.4 million we would have been spending on design in 23 has moved outward. I would also mention in both the Housing Commission and the train station, and the final one I'm going to talk about in a minute, the funds that are moving out of 23 are not local funds in the first place. So they are federal funds that aren't going to be spent. So the actual effect locally is the project is affected, but not direct things approved by council in the capital budget. And the final one I wanted to mention was the airport runway extension. Those of you who've been here a while know that's been in the CIP for some time. Again, it cannot proceed to that step without certain FAA clearances, which have not yet occurred. So that was roughly 4.2 million that would have been spent in 23 that will not be happening. So those were some significant minuses offset by some pluses led to that net 12% decrease. And then the final thing I just briefly wanted to mention are some statistics. So we had 60 projects with funding adjustments. So that's a lot. And I think that's a reflection of the pricing changes that are driven by the national supply chain issues and contractor shortages. They tend to bid higher. There are 28 projects with schedule adjustments, 12 that had both funding and schedule adjustments, and then 19 projects that were added. So that's my high level overview. And of course, then I will be here to answer your questions. And also if you need any assistance in answering anything raised during the public portion. And with that, I will turn it back over.
All right, very good. We will now open the public hearing for the CIP. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the proposed capital improvements plan update. If you wish to address Planning Commission on this item, please press *9 if you've dialed in by phone, or use the raised hand feature if you're viewing through the web link. If you need the call-in number for the meeting, it's 877-853-5247. And our meeting ID is 977-6634-1226. Mr. Leonard will select those who have raised their hand, calling on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number or by your name if you joined through the web link. Please move to a quiet area, mute any background sounds so that we can hear you clearly, and please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
Caller with the phone number ending with 326. You can unmute your phone using *6. Address the Planning Commission for up to 3 minutes.
Yeah. Hello, this is Jeff Crockett. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Great. So I noticed an omission in the capital budget, and that is consideration for the center of the city in the library lot. And in 2018, Proposition A was passed that call for that part or the library lot to be a commons. And since that time, there have been numerous groups. The one I think it would be prudent for you all to consult with is the center of the city task force, because they're in the midst of putting together some beginning planning that is probably going to be sort of a long-term vision. And it would seem to make sense to consult with them to figure in some kind of budget for this. I have long wanted, and this goes back like 25 years, a fountain in Ann Arbor. I don't know if any of you have been to Plymouth, but Plymouth has a beautiful fountain. It's a place for people to congregate, weddings, all kinds of different events. We really have nothing like it in Ann Arbor. And so I would encourage you all to consult with the center of the city, Council of the Commons, to fit in to the capital budget some consideration for a commons. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 134. Caller with the phone number ending with 134. You have 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard and Chair Mills. This is Ken Garber again. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on the CIP. I'll basically repeat my comments from last year. I suggested then that geothermal loops could be incorporated into some of these street and sewer projects. The 820 building electrification goals call for large-scale retrofits with heat pumps, and geothermal systems are one way to do this. As you know, they take advantage of the relatively constant ground temperature to heat or cool a refrigerant that circulates to the individual heat pump. More efficient than air source. But geothermal is also more expensive to install because excavation or drilling is involved. However, the city can lower the cost in its denser districts, mainly downtown, by laying down geothermal loops in which refrigerant that's warmed by the earth circulates continuously. Each building along the loop would need to install a heat pump system, but these homes and businesses will avoid the high upfront cost of the loop, which is converted into a monthly service fee to the city. For example, Boise, Idaho now heats 6 million square feet of downtown buildings during the winter this way, almost half of its entire downtown. Boise uses water from a geothermally heated underground river rather than a chemical refrigerant, but the principle is the same. Each time we rip up the streets, we could take advantage of the excavation to drill the holes and install the pipes that comprise the geothermal loop, thus lowering the overall cost without added disruption. Last year, staff properly questioned whether state law allowed municipal geothermal. The answer is yes. Valerie Brader, the city's contract energy attorney, told Energy Commission that a parallel city utility that competes with DTE is completely legal. Chris Bisdock, the lawyer for the Public Power Citizen Group, confirmed this. In October, the Office of Sustainability and Innovations issued a detailed report on a proposed city-owned sustainable energy utility. Geothermal, not just downtown, but also neighborhood level, is a big part of it. So we should take advantage of major road and sewer projects. Commissioner Gib Randall mentioned tonight several pending downtown street redesigns. In this CIP, I count 4 road reconstruction projects, 9 sanitary sewer extensions, and 43 water main projects. Not all of them will be suitable for geothermal installation, but let's look at them. The U of M is already doing this. Its plan calls for the eventual conversion of all campus buildings to geothermal heating and cooling with 20,000 boreholes drilled across all the campuses. We should be equally aggressive. Not in this CIP, then next year's. I don't know if this is best done on a case-by-case basis or with a high-level study. But each time we dig out and then fill in a hole, a trench, or a roadbed without laying geothermal pipe, we may be losing a valuable opportunity.
Thank you. If anyone else wishes to participate in the public hearing, you can press *9 on your phone or use the raised hand button at the bottom center of your screen.
Mr. Haber, you have 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. So I want to echo in some way what Jeff Crockett said at the beginning and the last speaker who emphasized the importance of geothermal. I speak on the Ann Arbor center of the city commons. I was an initiator. I live in the 5th Ward, Alan Haber, and I was an initiator of this effort back in 2009 to have the center of the city be a place devoted to fostering a culture of peace and nonviolence as a community commons. And the commons is a form of organization that pools resources and has them managed by the people who are actually using them. It is different from the city governing or a private corporation owning. It is the people who use it. And we're trying to develop a number of working groups. After after Proposal A was passed, the city council set up a center of the city task force that put forward a number of recommendations after about 7 months of work. I was part of that task force also. And I encourage you all to read those recommendations. It is, as Jeff Crockett noted, the Planning Commission, and indeed nowhere in the city has this popular vote actually been recognized and included into the master plan, which the task force said this is part of the master plan. So thinking forward in your longer term toward 2028, see how this center of the city becomes part of the master plan. And in the shorter run, see how the kinds of amenities that the center of the city task force identified as a short-term beginnings of making this a functional place, welcoming to everyone in town, through Wi-Fi, through public toilets, through a drinking fountain, through facilities that encourage artistic expression. A playground is when we passed the petition around, so many people said, if I had a place I could come downtown with my kids and
30 more seconds.
They can have a place to play. Well, the main point is the center of the city is part of the master plan as identified by the task force and by the voters, and you should see it that way. And in our planning, we look toward 2024, the bicentennial of the city, to see some high point in this development. So wherever it fits in your immediate capital plans and toward Wi-Fi and toilets and things like that are very short term. But in the longer term, see this as part of the opportunity to develop a unique social innovation in the center of the city. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Would anyone else like to provide public comment?
Yes, caller with the phone number ending with 083. I don't know if I accidentally removed your indication. If you were interested in addressing, please press *9 on your phone to indicate that you'd like to address the planning commission. Operator error potentially on my part.
And I'll use this opportunity to say if anyone else wishes to provide a public comment, if you've dialed in, it's *9. If you're watching us through the web link, click the raised hand button at the bottom of your screen.
See no other indication.
All right, I will read the motion. Whereas Section 1:185 of the Ann Arbor City Code requires that the City Planning Commission annually prepare a capital improvements program for the ensuing 6 fiscal years. Whereas the fiscal year 2022 to 2027 Capital Improvements Plan, CIP, was approved by the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission on January 5th, 2021. Whereas the fiscal year 2022-2027 CIP was approved with minor adjustments by the Ann Arbor City Council on May 17th, 2021, as the basis for the fiscal year 2022 capital budget. Whereas the second year of the fiscal year 2022 to 2027 CIP has been adjusted based on current conditions as related to the adjusted fiscal year 2023 capital budget to be considered by the City Council. And whereas a duly noticed public hearing was held by the City Planning Commission on December 7th, 2021, resolved that the City Planning Commission hereby approves the fiscal year 2023 to 2028 Capital Improvements Plan. Moved by Commissioner Sauvé, seconded by Commissioner Dish. Any discussion of the CIP, or who wants to kick off our discussion, I should say? And Mr. Leonard, your hand is up. You want to kick off our conversation?
Well, no, I'm going to have Ms. Gosselin kick it off. There were a couple comments about the center of the city. And so one of Ms. Gosselin's colleagues actually works very closely with the Center of the City Task Force. And I know we have representatives of that task force here if they want to add anything to it. But I wanted to start with Ms. Gosselin to just cover a conversation that she has had in regards to that question as it has come up previously.
Okay, just a couple of brief comments. Yes, Mr. Crockett and Mr. Haber's comments about there will undoubtedly be capital improvements that come out of the Council of the Commons. I'm just getting used to the new name that will end up in the capital improvement plan. At this point, however, there has been no specific adoption by a body of this is what we're going to do. Maybe it's a fountain like someone had mentioned, but once we know what specific improvements that are capital in nature and total more than 100,000. So I anticipate by fall at your next adjustment that you will be seeing Council of the Commons related capital improvements, but we can't put them in at the particular stage we're at because the specifics have not been resolved yet. There's lots of great ideas coming through that, but not here's where we're going definitively, and therefore we need X number of dollars. So coming, but not in this program. That is why it's not there currently.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
I'll just tag on to that as the Planning Commission liaison to the Council of the Commons. That's exactly correct. And what I was going to mention as well, there's no real plan or ask yet, specifically for the lot on top, the service parking lot on top of parking garage. Liberty Plaza is under parks, and so we're treating that sort of separately. But yeah, so there's no ask. We have a little bit of money that Commissioner Briggs was able to get put into the budget for a design process. And so staff is going to be putting out a request for information early in the new year to try to get some firms to let us know how much it might actually cost for a whole like design process, where we would hopefully get some of those ideas solidified that might then make it into a capital improvement plan. So yeah, I think we're not nearly ready to start putting money into this plan for that particular piece of land.
Other comments or questions? I will note that I was extremely heartened to see within the projects that are added a number of things that are specifically related to A20 or to the bikeway. And so I know I've ever since A20 came out, have been the squeaky wheel asking, like, when are some of those things going to make their way? And as those plans take shape, it's good to see them added even in this year where we tend to add minimal projects. So I think that that's great. Relatedly though, there has been lots of discussion about geothermal, at least, on and off at this table. Has that been part of the discussion? Because I know part of the CIP is actually programming in particular where our systems, our transportation system, water, sewer intersect. And so as there's discussion of kind of the energy space as well, has that started happening in City Hall?
I'm going to take that, I assume. This is kind of a twist on the Council of the Commons in that we're not in a position yet to talk about adding things to the capital improvement plan. As Mr. Garber said, it is, I've never specifically researched it, but if municipal government could have a geothermal utility, we don't have one yet. So any code related things like that would have to happen first. We have a water, sewer, and storm. Each of them are set up as a utility. We do not have a geothermal utility. So it may be something certainly that the sustainability group may be discussing that I have not been in on, but until that groundwork is laid from a code standpoint, we could not be planning for spending money on a utility that doesn't exist, because we just are not in that position at this point.
Understood. Also, again, kind of the scheduling of these systems together, I think that's one of the benefits of having a CIP that kind of thinks out and includes the involvement. And so I have confidence, but also like encourage regular reminders that as we are taking up some of these roads, thinking about future proofing them for all of the systems that may be required. I think I appreciate the reminders on that. I'm just curious, in looking at the projects that were added, there was something called a pump track within the parks. What is that?
I was hoping no one was going to ask me.
Oh, sorry. Never mind. It's not a typo. I was like,
but if you give me just a second, I'm going to.
Like, I think it's like cross, like, I could be way out on a limb here, but I'm going back to my young BMX bike days. I think it is like sort of a recreational trail for like mountain bikes / BMX bikes, where it might involve obstacles and the like.
Yeah, I was trying to see if when Colin Smith had me add it, and technically I made a note that that is not in 22-23, but he said for it to happen, he'd have to go after grants, and there's a lot of lead time. So he needed it to be in there and have a presence. But let me see if he described it in any way other than, no, he just literally had me put in create pump track. So I apologize that.
Well, to the BMX community, it's in the CIP. Like this is, and I appreciated that note about going after seeking additional funding. So, Commissioner, yes.
If you want to go with Google, it is a looped sequence of rollers and berms, swoopy bank turns for bike riders, designed to maximize your momentum so you can ride with minimal pedaling.
Oh, I like the swoopy bank turns. Like, cool. Commissioner Dish.
So I want to register my total excitement and thrilledness about the B2B Bandamer to Barton connection money that's in here. I am so excited and thrilled, and I'm so thankful to the city for entering into that project. And I want to just make sure that I completely understood, Ms. Goslin, that given that we do not yet have a geothermal utility established, there wouldn't really be any point in asking staff to assess the projects that are scheduled, scoped out in the CIP to see which ones, since we're ripping up the street anyway, which ones we might want to install geothermal, because we just, that would be really putting the cart before the horse.
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt, and then Commissioner Weich.
I'm not even sure if I'm how to ask this question or if this is even like a real question. So I was also surprised that the total funding need was like $13 million lower. And then, you know, it like makes sense. So some projects went up, these 4 were really big and they got pushed out. You mentioned, I think that those 4 projects have a lot of federal dollars. So I'm just sort of wondering, you know, the projects that went up, if they're more local dollars, like how does that, how much are we actually asking for more locally in FY23 than we were? And how does that work? Because I know.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a hard one to simply answer, but you can see from the number that are in the category of projects with funding adjustment that there were some that went down, but there were a number that went up. And some of those still are outside asks, but a lot of them are local inside. So I would say that if you took the outside funds out there, I would believe there would be a net increase of local dollars. Okay. And they, most of those are driven by pricing changes, like in sanitary sewer lining projects, for example. It's like, wow, price of those is going up. So it's a good question. And yes, I would say the net is probably positive from local dollars.
This is probably my own ignorance of budgets, but like, what do these things come at the expense of? Like, do other things have to be reduced somewhere else to make the capital improvement plan work?
Yes, and they, again, if you look at 22, 23, we're focusing on 23, but 22 affects it. And some of them you're just seeing an increase in 23 because it moved from 22 to 23, but we already had the money budgeted for it. So
it just rolls in.
Yeah, and if we have bids come in high during the course of the year, we have to adjust. And sometimes we decide something just has to slide out. But the finance people are like gold in helping us navigate our way through those when they arise. But often it's plus because it was a delay. So it's so complicated trying to say this is exactly what the nature of the change was. I appreciate that question.
Budgets are hard. I appreciate how you've made this as easy to understand as possible. So thank you very much.
Commissioner White?
So this is my first CIP, so forgive any rookie questions. So one, I was just wondering around the ability to talk specifically, and this is just a process, not necessarily for this one, because I think this process has already moved along, but for specific line items. So for instance, the East Medical Bridge expansion, that funding allocation is changing because of action that council took to agree with the university to expand that bridge. It already needed to be repaired. And so now that it's in the capital budget, does Planning Commission have any ability to make any funding adjustments at this approval state? Or is that funding allocation already achieved by a council action?
That particular one.
Just for an example, I could pick something else, but
that's a difficult one. But a lot of these things in 23 are technically not approved for funding until council acts in May of 23 or May of 22 for the 23 budget. These are the asks for them. Now, things that were in 22 are already budgeted, and if they go up or down, you know, those changes get highlighted, but, you know, unless they're a new 22 ask, which could end up triggering like 8 votes at council, I don't think we have any of those. But the East Medical Center Bridge in particular is one that has to be subject to what's called a memo of understanding with the university. And the university, a lot of money in there is university money. So both parties, and then council is the body that approves memos of understanding with the university, or it could be with the county, like on Vandermeer to Barton. I assume there'll be one. So that's the most complicated one. But otherwise, you know, what we have in here is how many dollars we need to accomplish it. And, you know, questions you have about projects or not, you know, wondering why they're in here at all, whatever, everything is fair game in that sense, but the dollars are what it's going to take to bring it forward, and it'll be up to council to fund the 23 projects.
so if we wanted to make an adjustment, again, just fielding a question, that would be an amendment to the proposal with that particular line item highlighted, and then that would be subject to our approval since it has to be approved by Planning Commission.
Yes, that could happen in theory. It generally doesn't, but it can. And I'm thinking in the time I've been here, what I've seen more often happen is something that's not in here at all that maybe commission would ask to add. And again, the dollars that it takes to accomplish a project, you could say, okay, let's knock this down to X, but then I would be asked the question, is that reasonable to do? And the answer is probably going to be no, because the budget is what staff and, you know, wherever the dollar came from have felt that it takes. So I'm sorry that's not a super clear answer, but
you're helping me, because the nature of the concern is the connection of the bike paths as they come around that section. So the conversation was around adding another lane of traffic. And so I was just trying to understand the ability for Planning Commission to prioritize a different mode of transportation over car. And could we do that through this capital plan by prioritizing a connection from the university back into the border-to-border trail as it crosses Fuller? And so then that would take funds away from the bridge and move it to the bike trail. So that was the nature of the question, but I'm happy to talk some more offline with you about it for a future thing.
Yeah, that would be great. And I'll tell you, there are, besides the bridge project itself, there are also in active transportation other bike connection projects allied with that bridge project. But you're right, the most recent request to actually add laneage on the bridge, which means redoing the bridge, is why the price went up. Then I know there are currently design discussions about, do we want the bikes on the bridge in an extra bike lane, or is it safer, using the money we have elsewhere? So I think that's a fine design question that we aren't going to be able to adjust for at this table. But I believe in perhaps Councilmember Dish, I think there have been some discussions already at council on that she might actually be better equipped to update you on where that stands in this case than I am.
Yeah, it was less on an update, but just trying to understand the mechanism that we have at this table, because if there is a mechanism for this body to reprioritize something, understanding what that process is to achieve our goal, as opposed to just a continuation of something that we may not want to prioritize. But thank you.
Gotcha.
I appreciate the conversation.
Mr. Leonard.
Yeah, Commissioner White, great questions. And I hope I'm not going to make anything worse. I'm happy to help with that conversation. But so the Planning Commission approves the capital improvement plan. That's by state legislation. And I will tell you, one of the benefits that we have here at the city that not every community that's subject to that same planning enabling act across the state of Michigan has, is we have, frankly, resources and expertise and the ability to do the partnerships and the scoring and the prioritization that Deb talked about in the working session. The sort of communities of interest, if you will, my terminology, that are assembled around these different categories to identify projects, to help prioritize projects, to determine how to score and evaluate those projects against one another to reach those priorities. And we are, I would say, we are well positioned because of all those resources, perhaps to a different extent than some other communities in the state of Michigan, where the Planning Commission weighing in on the capital improvements plan is just really critical to bring any land use dialogue maybe to how those resources are prioritized. But the short of it is you can absolutely have influence over it by the decisions that are made with the capital improvement plan. That has happened in the past. Commissioner Mills was talking about sustainability. That has been, I don't see it as maybe like one project, but that has been a trend that has come up repeatedly, and we're starting to see more evidence of that in the capital improvement plan over time. Ultimately, City Council uses this as a plan. They ultimately decide what to fund through their budget. So regardless of the decisions that are in the capital improvements plans, it is critical to help plan. It's critical to help size what is feasible with the resources available on a time basis. But at the end of the day, the plan is adopted by both bodies, but the budget actions of the City Council are truly what get projects done. So just a little bit more broader lens on the interaction.
In this specific case, I'm actually now this has me curious in terms of the scheduling, because this is border to border that runs through there. There are two other projects I think on this inactive transportation. The schedule, which I think, if they're not this specific project, are certainly adjacent: Fuller Maiden Lane and then the connection under Fuller Road. The scheduling for them is significantly farther out, though, and again, makes me question prioritization of that and whether they're actually being scheduled together. So it's not this, it's more, do you have any sense of, I know that we try to schedule things together. So why is there such it looks like 2027 which is almost off the charts, right? For some of those projects in the active transportation.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. This one was very awkward in that we're focusing on 22, 23. There was already some activity on the bridge in here, which was just design money. Then all of a sudden this, accelerated process was brought up. And if it shakes out, then I anticipate next fall, we will pull those associated projects in to the second year of the build for the bridge so that they'll go together, but the bridge itself would have to be replaced for all those things to physically come and match it. So I didn't try to pull them forward like I usually would to match this schedule because we haven't had the ability yet to let go for TAP grants and so on, but I do believe they will end up being pulled back into alignment if in fact this project with the bridge goes forward as it is in here. If the university and the city, totally come to terms on this and the movement forward as it stands in here, then in the fall we would pull those back to match it. But I felt it was premature because of when this got in, but it was a big dollar decision. If we're going to move it forward, that it could affect, $3 million in 23 part, which is university. So yes, I usually would have pulled them with, but I was a little hesitant. But council already has on the books a directive that when the intersection goes, and now that's also meaning replacing the bridge, that those need to go with it. So they will end up having to come in and match. But this is like 23, 24 project. And I would envision the active transportation being the second part of the construction project anyway. So in this fall, next fall, I should say, I think you will see them being expedited into 24, which will be the second year of the bridge project. But we wouldn't be pulling them all the way back because there's no way they're going to start in 23. The design will still be finishing up in the early part of 23. Any construction would be in the latter part. It's simply not going to need to happen in 23 to physically keep them together.
So the design for them does not need to be brought forward, or that's the design for that component is included as part of the bridge design.
I think the transitions will end up being part of this current design project, like where, making sure if there's any physical connections. And it's not just the bridge, it's the whole, where the roads come together, because there's the one connection that they're envisioning coming out of the parking lot, as we call it, where the train station might go someday, going under the railroad abutment, coming up, and ultimately going over the water, maybe not on the bridge. And that comes to Commissioner Weiss was talking about, well, maybe they'll decide they want to bring the bikes across the bridge. So that question is going to come into play in the design for the bridge. I think there'll probably be a lot of healthy discussion as part of the design process. Really, where's the best place for the border-to-border style? Is it where we envisioned on a bridge of its own, or is it moving it onto this bridge? And once they decide, then we know what to do with the monies. So it's an awkward spot with regard to 23. I felt comfortable that we could address it in the next edit and still have it come together.
All right, Mr. Leonard, did you?
Yeah, thank you. So I think this discussion is really great. I think it's elevating to me that sort of what I said about, the way that the city's approaching it. I think that what I'm hearing is a little bit more desire for the Planning Commission to maybe see some of that processing and the like. And so I just, as a reminder, because this is an update, this is sort of a relatively modest modification to the plan, but I think what it tells me is that we should start this conversation on the next update soon after our action on this, like early in 2022, and bring Deb back. And I think let's dedicate some time to making sure that she is getting those policy directives that you would like to transmit in the next CIP whether it's specific projects, whether it's concepts, because then she can take that as those communities of interest meet as a filter to those discussions and dialogue to make sure that when it comes back to you at the end of that process, it's, if not including those, it is acknowledging them and at least coming to you with why the decisions were made as presented. So, great discussion, and I think we should continue that momentum. I'm just thinking about the conversation about the center of the city, sustainability, any progress that's made on utilities, of course, non-motorized. So I think it seems to me that the time is right to maybe kick that dialogue off sooner than later for the next year, which is sort of, for lack of a better term, a blank slate. That's really opening it up broadly to identify new projects and priorities.
I think that's great. I think that makes a lot of sense, and
I agree.
pulling that together. Other questions or comments? All right, Mr. Leonard, we are ready for a roll call vote, I think.
Commissioner Dish.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Weich.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
Yes.
Commissioner Gibb Randall.
Yes.
Commissioner Sobe.
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yes.
Carries unanimously.
Very good.
Appreciate it.
Deb, once again, I would just like to thank, it is remarkable the expertise that you bring to budgets, sustainability, transportation, utilities.
Thank you.
Remarkable.
Yeah. Having all the projects in your head and how they interact is a superhuman skill.
You threw me on the pump track, though.
Oh, well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Can we take a 7-minute break to fill our water bottles before, I think we're at about the halfway point, hopefully more than halfway point. So we'll reconvene at 8:55. We're on item 8C. This is the Ann Arbor Chinese Christian Church site plan for city council approval and special exception use, which is for planning commission approval. This is at 1750 Duvarin Road, expanding to provide a social gathering area and classrooms. I see that we've had development team or petitioner folks move on into the kind of speaking section. So you folks will have up to 10 minutes to provide a presentation before we hear from Mr. Kowalski and then the public hearing. And have you made arrangements if you need to share screen?
Yes, my name is Sue Dickinson. I'm with Midwestern Consulting. We did the site work and the site plan for this project. And I would, I will be sharing my screen here.
Super.
Is that, you can see it? Excellent. So this project is located at 1750 Duvarin Road. There's an existing Ann Arbor Chinese Christian church, and this site plan is for an expansion of that church. So tonight on the meeting here, we do have all of the building expansion committee from the church and the pastor. For the design team, I'm here, but Tina Fix, our landscape architect, could not be here. So hopefully there aren't too many specific landscaping questions for me. And we also have Zion Church Builders, the architect Dan White on, and Jim Hines as well to help answer questions. So it was very interesting listening to the presentation for the Village of Ann Arbor, since they'll be our neighbors. So the church is located in Northeast Ann Arbor. You can see here in blue is the total acreage, 8.51 acres. It is east of Pontiac Trail and west of Leslie Park Circle, between Olson Park and Leslie Park. It's zoned R4A, and the existing use church is a special exception use. So you can easily see that residential and parkland is what surrounds the property. Also interesting to note, the landfill that was discussed with the Village of Ann Arbor presentation does extend onto the southern portion of the church property. So as far as the existing conditions go, the existing church was constructed in 1999. The special exception use has a capacity of 160 people. There's an existing parking agreement with food gatherers across the street, and there's a crosswalk that is provided. And we'd like to, part of our application is to increase our capacity to 240 people. There was a failed site plan attempt back in about 2006, and I was involved in that as well. So I'm very happy to be here tonight and bringing forward a scaled down request from what was asked before. But during that previous submittal, we did find that there is a native forest fragment to the west and south of the church. So when we were planning for this expansion, we made sure that we stayed in the areas that were not treed so that we could protect and preserve those beautiful trees. So the existing building is here, and it's about 8,200 square feet. And the existing parking lot is going to be maintained. There's a few changes that needing to happen to it, as the dumpster location is going to be relocated from this area over to this corner, so that it's easier for it to be able to be emptied. And these 4 parking spaces, unfortunately, were constructed within the front setback. And so the parking lot's being revised a little bit in order to get those out of the front setback. The stormwater management basin is currently a wet basin, and it's located up in this corner, and that is being improved. It's being enlarged because of the increase of impervious area with the new building, but it's also being improved by not being, it's not going to be deeper than its outlet. So we can talk more about that. And there will be a variance requested due to that existing parking agreement not being permanent. It's a lease agreement right now. So our project that we're here to discuss is the first floor has about 6,400 square feet, and it has 3 classrooms and a social hall that will seat about 128 people. And then it has a second story that has 5 classrooms, about 2,800 square feet. So the social hall is a two-story room. So as I mentioned, the combined proposed capacity is 240. The parking, we are adding 4 electrical vehicle parking spaces, 2 chargers, and a variance will be requested for that as well, because that's a much reduced number from what your ordinance states. The features are that we are preserving the native forest fragment, and the existing detention basin is being improved to minimize the open standing water. So the utility services for the new building, it is going to be fire suppressed. So the blue line is the fire service lead that needs to go out to the public water main in the street. It couldn't connect to this water main. The orange line is the sanitary sewer lead that also had to go out to the public sewer, which unfortunately is all the way across to Dubarn. The green outline is the increased area. It's where the 100-year storm elevation will store. And we'll be using the same outlet for the pond for the detention area in order to go out to the Dubarn storm sewer. Here is the landscape plan. So you'll notice that we're adding 4 trees and 42 shrubs for the right-of-way screening, along with 8 street trees. We're adding 5 interior island trees, and the conflicting land use buffer over towards the Leslie Park side on the east side of our site. We're adding 16, well, we've got 16 trees that are remaining, and we're adding 58 shrubs. And then part of our citizen participation meeting, it was noted that when DTE came through and did some maintenance on the utility line, that they removed some trees in this area. So we added plantings to replace those. So this is the proposed building. This is the existing building here. And so this is the end elevation, but you can see the 2 stories in the doorway. And so here's the back elevation and the front elevation of the building. And this is the floor plan. So this is the first floor with the sidewalks shown, the connection to the existing church. And you can see the 3 classrooms and the restrooms on the first floor and the social hall. And then upstairs, we have 5 classrooms. So that's my presentation. I'm here to answer any questions. And as was stated, we have a lot of the other team members here as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kowalski.
Good evening, everybody. Okay, so I'll touch on a couple of the highlights here. Petitioner did a good job of really summarizing the main features of the proposal. A couple of things I do want to add to that is, as far as the natural features, as you guys can tell, the majority of them obviously are being saved on the site. There's a very high quality natural woodland in that area that would be preserved. There is one landmark tree that would be removed for the expansion. They are mitigating for that as required, of course. A couple of key things. So this is, of course, a special exception use. So and I just want to remind the Planning Commission as well that special exception use is, although the site plan will proceed to City Council for final approval, the special exception use will be approved or denied by the Planning Commission. So again, and obviously without that, if it were to be denied, then the site plan would not be able to proceed further. So the special exception use we did add, so there is a separate motion for that special exception use. Within that special exception use, we do put the limitation of what they have offered as far as the capacity of the facility, the church facility of 240 people within there. In addition to that, there is a revised motion that we had just emailed out. I apologize. I had left that off of the original Planning Commission motion. That is to include the 2 landscape modifications that they're requesting. Both of those landscape modifications were reviewed and approved by our landscape staff member. The first modification, or one of the modifications, is for the code requires 15 spaces in a row. You have to have a landscape island. In that case, she did accept them not putting in the landscape island. In a couple places, they have a couple more than the 15 spaces, giving a parking concern, and I guess not significant parking lot modifications. She did accept that, as well as a modification for the bioretention islands. That is also, again, a requirement, but without their justification, without the significant modification of that parking lot, which again, it's more than just putting in the bioretention. You have to have everything drained there properly. So it does require some significant reconstruction of that parking lot. One item I did in particular, I also wanted to touch on is you can notice that the plan would be, if it was to be passed tonight here at Planning Commission, they will need to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, as Petitioner mentioned, they're requesting 2 variances. Really, the first variance is a little bit more of an unusual one, which is one you don't see too often. That is just going to be, it's a variance from the parking requirement, really. So they need the, but I'm drawing a blank on the spaces. I believe it's 80. Yes, and they have the 63 car parking. So it'd be 17 spaces. So they've had in place for a number of years, and the petitioner may be able to highlight as many, but really, as far as I could look back in that record from this original special exception use approval, which I think I had written down in 2006. I'm drawing a blank on that, but it's been in place for quite a while with the food gatherers location across the street. So they have the signed lease agreement, and they have an excess. It's only for the use of kind of the warehouse, the office spaces. If you guys are familiar with that, there's the residential section as well as the warehousing and office space. So they have about 50 spaces there for the warehouse and office space. Those spaces, and obviously these peak times run really perfectly because obviously the church functions typically are, evening hours on the weekend, which is where the warehouse and office uses are not used. And actually, even knowing there from the day when they are used, they have a surplus of spaces as well during the day. But however, the code does require that it has to be a permanent, recorded access easement, and sorry, not access, a parking easement. And those spaces cannot be counted they can't count for required parking for 2 locations. So basically, even though it's a shared kind of agreement and it works with off-peak hours, technically it does not meet the requirements of the code. So that is what they need to go for the variance. While I mean, staff personally, I feel it meets the intent. However, that would need to go to the zoning board of appeals for approval, as well as they are requesting a variance from the EV parking spaces to be installed. And that would be, I believe, that the request, they're going to be installing 4 spaces. And really kind of, oh, so I did look, the original special exception use for this was approved in 1996. And that was for the 160, which is still in place today. Again, so what is really triggering that, the renewal of that special exception use is obviously this expansion and the use of that, the new facility. One other concern we did have, you know, perhaps, or not even a concern that we, an issue that we had brought up with the petitioners, you know, would this facility be used for like weddings and like major social gatherings, things like that? And they indicated, no, they have no plans for that. You know, it's really meant for church functions, but they were very willing. And I think in the past have had some neighborhood meetings within there. So things like that, but it's not going to be a banquet facility. There's no formal kitchen located within there. Again, with that, I think that does summarize up my presentation at this time. And staff is recommending approval of both the special exception use as well as the site plan, contingent upon, of course, the variance is being granted by the zoning board of appeals. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I will open up the public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the proposed Ann Arbor Chinese Christian Church site plan and special exception use permit. If you wish to address the Planning Commission on this item and you're joining by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. If you've joined us through the web link, you can press the raised hand button. If you're watching us and would like to call in now, the dial-in number is 877-853-5247, and our meeting ID is 977-6634-1226. Mr. Leonard will select those who have raised their hand. Again, you can do that digitally on a phone by pressing *9 or by pressing the raised hand button if you've joined us through Zoom. When it's your turn to speak, you'll hear an automated message that you're able to unmute yourself. Please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sound so that we can hear you. And please also state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
Ann Bannister? Ann Bannister, you can unmute yourself using the button you just did. You have 3 minutes to address the commission.
Great, thank you. I don't need 3 minutes. Ann Bannister, former Ward 1 councilperson from North Main Street. And I just wanted to applaud and congratulate the church for making a design that preserved the landmark forest there. I think that'll serve the property well and and continue to be wildlife habitat and support the ecosystem. So I hope more property owners will go with designs like that that are sensible and preserve those landmark trees. And so thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you. If anyone else wishes to address the Planning Commission during the public hearing, you can use the raised hand button on your computer or press *9 on your phone. All right, seeing none, I will start to read the motions, and we have 3. First, about the site plan. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the Mayor and City Council approve the Ann Arbor Chinese Christian Church 1750 Duvarin Road site plan. Second is the landscape modification. So the Planning Commission approves the following landscape modifications. 1, allow existing landscape islands to remain without bioretention capacity. And 2, allow parking lot to continue with greater than 15 spaces without a landscape island. And then the third is for the special exception use. So the Ann Arbor Planning Commission, after hearing all interested persons and reviewing all relevant information, finds the petition substantially meets the standards in Chapter 55, Ann Arbor Unified Development Code, Section 5.29.5, which is special exception use, and therefore approves the Ann Arbor Chinese Christian Church at 1750 Duvarin Road, special exception use for church uses. This approval is based on the following findings. 1, the proposed uses will be consistent with the objectives of the comprehensive plan, permitting churches and schools by serving residents in their district. 2, the proposed use will not adversely impact traffic, pedestrians, bicyclists, circulation, or road intersections based on the location and existing uses. 3, a site plan documenting the existing and proposed conditions of the site has been submitted as part of this application. This special exception use approval is based on the following conditions. 1, the church use maintains a maximum capacity seating, let me say that again. The church use maintains a maximum seating capacity of 240 persons. That is the end of those 3 motions. Would anyone like to move them? Moved by Commissioner Weich, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. We are in discussion. Anyone want to kick us off? And I'm assuming that we can take these all together, unless anybody objects otherwise. Commissioner Weich, go for it.
This is for staff. Just why is the 240 seating capacity related to parking? Because I was just surprised to see a specific cap on the seating capacity of the facility. And I was trying to relate that to the church on Maple and whether they had the same restriction. And I was trying to see if it was related to parking or traffic.
Yes.
So, okay.
Yes, so the 240 is, sorry if I cut you off. The 240 is the capacity is, yes, directly related to the parking count. That's correct. And if you remember the church on Maple, they did not have a special exception use approval because they were still within theirs. So that's kind of why that cap, they already had one in place, but we didn't revisit it on that one. So that's why this is a little bit different on that one, but you are correct. It's directly related to that parking count.
And then this can be answered offline. What are the concerns for the petitioner? Let's say they just have a fantastic weekend and 300 people show up, but they're not exceeding the parking and they're not creating more traffic. There's no violation. Otherwise, will we be into a building code violation? Like I'm just stuck on the 240 because I'm just trying to figure out, like, once you hit 241, sorry, I can't let you in because we're stuck. And as a pastor, we would never turn away anybody who was coming to church on a Sunday. So just trying to figure out what the thing is. And you can answer me offline because I don't think it's we have to take up the time tonight to talk through it. But I'm just stuck.
Yes, we can certainly get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions or comments? Go ahead, Commissioner Gabrandel.
Yeah, a couple of things. I'm fine with not doing the depressed island. I know it's been sort of a tricky thing, but there's been a lot of projects that have had to do this, and I know it's kind of a tricky thing in our code. I do have a grading question, and that is, as I'm looking at the grading plan, it looks weirdly steep in the parking lot as you get close to the new building in terms of the cross slopes and things like that, where some of those parking spots are. And I'm assuming that you're fighting the finished floor elevation of the proposed building, how it connects to the existing building, and how to be able to get ADA access into that. But if I'm looking at this based on sort of a typical dimension of a parking spot, because I don't have a scale on my screen, it looks like those grades are pretty steep, like 1 on 12 or 1 on 15 or something like that, which seems pretty tricky to park in for those spaces where this parking lot suddenly kind of comes up to be able to meet the new addition. So I'm presuming that engineering looked at all of this, but it's just it's a little funky in terms of how a parking lot would normally be graded. So it's something that I'm just wondering about. And it looks like you're trying to kind of figure out where I'm talking about. Yeah, I know. But you can kind of guesstimate based on, I don't expect you to say it's exactly, 1 on 11.2 or something like that. But if you just look at the scale of the parking spot and you look at the distance between those contours, between the 922, 923, and 924, it just seems like the parking lot like rises very suddenly in front of that addition. And I'm just wondering, like, what is that going to be like for people walking from the rest of the parking lot up to this area, especially given that there isn't a sidewalk along that southeastern edge of the parking lot, and kind of how you see that all functioning for just the reality of people getting there on a icy morning or whatever. So that's, I guess, my first question.
I'd be glad to help answer that. If the reason that it's very flat at the very southern corner of the parking lot is because of those barrier-free spaces, and then we set the building floor elevation to match the existing church, because eventually, when they can afford to fire suppress the existing church, we may connect the two. That's, you know, way in the future. So the whole reason why the parking lot is as steep in that area is, just like you were saying, is just to try to match what the existing grade was, while we were able to make the ADA compliant spaces. So those had to be less than 2%. And so in order to tie in, the rest of that portion of the parking lot had to be steeper. It's about 1 in, you know, if I've got the scale and everything right, I mean, you're right, it's about 1 in 12. So it would be about 8% through there, which, you know, it's a matter of balancing the budget with the church and trying not to reconstruct the whole parking lot.
Right. It just seems to me that it's like, and again, I know you've come this far, and this really, I'm assuming, should be kind of thought about at the engineering review level, not necessarily at this level. But I guess I just question, like, it seems like some more spaces should have been demoed in order to smooth that grade out so that it's not so. I just hope that the client understands what it's going to feel like there to park in some of those spaces, which is essentially like an ADA ramp and you're parked sideways on it. I mean, it's gonna, those spots are gonna be really just outside of those ADA spots. It's gonna be really steep. So it's like, just, you know, again, like, this is probably not the time to take this sort of thing up, but it's just worth making sure that everybody understands what they're getting. Yeah, because it just, I think that's really hard for people to get. You know what I mean? Just in terms of looking at plans, and that, you know, it may make sense to make some of those into a parking lot island or something that can take up the grade more easily than somebody parked and your door just like swings open really wildly, you know, on one side, and it is really hard to push open on the other side, you know? So I guess it's just something to think about in terms of just the design and how it feels. I think that I really like, actually, the whole sharing of the parking with the facility across the street. I think I wish more, we had more agreements like that. I think it's a really creative way to deal with parking overflow, so that, you know, especially facilities that are just used really heavily on certain days, you know, and working that with other facilities that have different kind of uses. And when their peak demand is. So I'm really glad to see that. I do not want to see just like a ginormous parking lot here when you have a walkway and all those kinds of things. I think that's great. So I'm very supportive of that variance going through and working that out. Even though it doesn't quite comply, I'm completely supportive of that. Obviously, that's going to be up to the ZBA to figure that one out. Generally speaking, I think this makes sense. And this is not really our jurisdiction. I'm a little surprised there's so few windows at the ground level for the side that faces the parking lot and the street. feels pretty harsh. It's like these little tiny windows up at the top, and it seems like a big gathering area like that. You'd want to have some openness to it, but again, that's to each his own in terms of how you would want to design that space, unless you're kind of using it as a basketball court space in the future for recreation or something like that, where you really don't want to have windows. But it seems just a little harsh from the pedestrian side, even though I know there's not a lot of pedestrian view of this. It just feels a little brutal to just have these little tiny high windows along the side that is the kind of welcoming to the parking lot facade of it. But again, that's not really our place to govern any of that. It just seems a little harsh to me. So generally speaking, I'm in support of this. One thing I am not in support of is only doing the 4 EV spots. I feel like it would be really straightforward for you all to be able to add the required spots by simply extending the electric line along that southeast edge of the parking lot. There's no sidewalk you have to tear up. There's no nothing. It just doesn't seem to me that there's anything obvious in the way of being able to supply that there. And I think it's just the way that we want to go. It's part of the regulation that we have. And I feel strongly that I think you all should comply with that standard that we have, because it really doesn't look to me like a heavy lift in terms of how you would deal with reconstructing the parking lot, because it's not like you have to change things up. That there's not a lot of infrastructure you'd have to rip up in order to be able to put that in. So I think that that's the one part of the petition that I do not support in the way that it is. Otherwise, I'm supportive of it.
I appreciate your comments, Shannon, and we will look at that grading. I know more of the parking lot ended up being disturbed because of the utilities, so it wouldn't take much more to push that grading out.
That's what I was thinking, that storm line is also, getting cut out there, and by just extending it a couple more spaces, you might be able to make it work a little bit more gently for users.
Mr. Leonard, you raised your hand earlier. Did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I just want to touch on that last conversation between the petitioner and Commissioner Gabrandel. I don't think it makes sense for us to redesign that portion here at the table, but it sounds like there might be generally support about improving that. And I was just going to say that because we've got a little bit of time because of the variances that we'll be seeking, Matt and the petitioner could work to see if they want to reconsider that. And we'd be of course happy as the site plan progresses to City Council, just to acknowledge that there was some modifications from the version that the Planning Commission saw in response to a concern raised about the grade for those particular spots. So timing, there's a lot of steps for this one, but that would provide an opportunity for conversation between the petitioner and the city to just perhaps make some modifications. At worst, nothing happens, but we can highlight that if there's an evolution before it goes to City Council.
Other questions or comments? I will chime in that I too am very happy and heartened to see the lease with the neighboring property and not expanding the parking on this particular site. I think that makes wise use of existing infrastructure, and appreciate that your congregants are walking across the street. It's not that far of a walk, and also that there's the pedestrian infrastructure to allow for that. So I think that's I'd love to see more of that. Again, this highlights among the things that we've been talking in ORC about looking at our parking standards. So this is just another example of both kind of how we're folks who are, I think, doing the, parking lot sharing things that we want to see have to go through extra hoops right now to get that approved. And so I think that's helpful. And also on the EV parking, I'm interested to see kind of what the the ZBA has to say about that. I think that this is one where spaces that are clearly disturbed, I think it makes sense to rebuild it with this. I'm not sure how much of it is actually not. So I will leave that. That's not our jurisdiction anyway. That's going to be in ZBA's hands. But I think that that's another one where kind of looking at what our standard is for EV parking and when it's required, I think is one of the things that's on our work plan too. Mr. Leonard, yes.
Yeah. Regarding the EV parking, there's been a couple comments on that, and I just wanted to point out that it is an application that would ultimately be decided by the Zoning Board of Appeals, but you have some, your decision can be relative to that as well. So right now, this plan would require, as presented to you, would require that variance being granted. Alternatively, you could add a condition to your site plan approval that recommends that the plan be modified to fully meet the EV ordinance. Again, I wouldn't design it here, but that would be a condition that would direct the petitioner and staff to work on adding those to be fully compliant to the ordinance. So in either circumstance, the ZBA, I want to be clear, if the ZBA grants a variance, you adding that condition to the site plan doesn't eliminate the possibility of them seeking a variance or the variance being granted and a subsequent plan then being compliant. But it is a way of messaging, I think, from the Planning Commission's perspective, if that is of interest.
I guess, I mean, this has come up with churches. Like, I mean, many of the times where we've seen this, it's been associated with church uses. I'm curious, maybe it's that I don't quite understand it. And what part of the parking lot is being rebuilt, more or less? I mean, clearly there's spots that Commissioner Gibrandel picked up in the grading plan. Those are currently not at that slope. So do you have some, go ahead, Ms. Dickinson.
I'd be glad to share my screen again if that would be helpful.
That would be helpful.
Okay. So, oops.
I was gonna say, we saw it and then it's,
yeah. Okay. You saw it, now you can't?
Right.
Okay. All right. Share screen. I've got the right.
Okay.
Yep, we got it.
Okay, excellent. So the darker shaded areas right in here are the portions of the parking lot that are being repaved. So this is concrete down here, but this is all asphalt here. And this is mainly because the existing barrier-free spots were over 2%, so they were not compliant. And so we made that, leveled that out. And then some of these are because of the utilities coming across. So the steep grades are right in this area that Shannon spoke of. So what I was thinking is that maybe we can bring it down to this far, a couple more spots, parking spaces, and
I'm not seeing a cursor.
I'm not either. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
There we go. Yep, now we see it. All right, so Shannon was talking about the steep spots where?
Right here.
Okay.
So this is not the grading plan. That was not part of the presentation. I can.
No, that's totally fine. We trust you.
Somewhere too, but
reading that would be hard. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So, but I was thinking is that since now we have this utility coming through and these utilities is why this part of the pavement is now coming out. So if we brought this down further, we could make this pavement be less steep. So in the end, maybe we'll be reconstructing the parking lot out to this edge. So all along here. But I would like to be able to take this moment to say that required per the ordinance based on the 240 seating capacity, we'd be required to install 8 EV parking spaces, have ready 8 more, and then have capable 12 more of that. So a total of 28 spaces. So that would be, more than just this line of parking. It would be that whole line of parking and these over here probably. Just wanted to mention that.
And from my perspective, again, thank you very much for sharing that. I defer to kind of Commissioner Gibrandel, whether you were feeling strongly. I am comfortable with saying the part that's disturbed, like not requiring tearing up any more than what is already under construction, but there's quite a few, there's more than 4 spaces that are going to be affected by this. And so installing more than, including EV infrastructure in more than 4 seems to me to make sense and is in the spirit of kind of where we were, not requiring tearing up things unnecessarily, but if things are already being torn up to install that infrastructure there. But I welcome other commissioners' thoughts on that. And Ms. Dickinson, did you have more to add in terms of, yeah?
I just wanted to say that also what Shannon was saying is that whole length of parking spaces on that south edge, there's no sidewalk underneath it. So that's what she meant, is that we could add more chargers without having to tear up pavement or sidewalk. Thank you.
Yeah. And it's also putting the conduit in to be EV capable, EV ready is super, that should not be onerous there. It's my understanding too. Other commissioners have thoughts on this or other? I don't feel super strong. I mean, ultimately, I feel like the ZBA has, in their analysis in the past, in these situations, has done this sort of analysis. And so to some extent, I trust kind of the balancing that they think through on this. But I would welcome others' thoughts on this issue or others. Go ahead, Commissioner Abrams.
Just a question about procedure. So if we were to vote to approve the site plan this evening, that approval is contingent on the variances being approved. But if the ZBA wanted to kind of counter offer, which is what I think you're indicating, Chair Mills, that like there might be a kind of negotiation, or are we offering a kind of middle ground negotiation? I guess what I'm wondering is like, if they deny it, then the site plan is denied, and then the petitioner comes back here again with something that they think they can get through ZBA.
I would say that if the variance was denied, I don't think it would be a substantive change to the layout. That would mean that the plan would likely be modified before it progressed to City Council, and it couldn't be approved by City Council at that point as meeting the standards unless all of that EV parking was provided. Does
the ZBA have the authority to negotiate a compromise variance?
No. They don't. They don't. But one of the standards that is utilized in considering a variance is this the minimum variance necessary in order to it to be granted for Matt, you probably have the rest of that language more than I do, but so oftentimes it's not a negotiation, but oftentimes they respond to something and they might sort of go back to the petitioner and say, this doesn't feel like the minimum variance that's necessary. And it might appear a bit as a back and forth, but it really is sort of bearing out that particular variance standard about what is a reasonable variance and what is the minimum exception from the code that would be warranted based on the conditions of the property. So, that's a long way of saying it can be modified from the ask, but it's not quite as simple back and
The only thing I would just add to that is we will provide them a copy of these plans, including like that grading plan that shows the disturbance limits within that parking lot. So that's kind of part of that report and part of the information that the ZBA will be able to take in as well as part of their decision making.
Okay. I'm not sure how to do this in a clean way because there's a lot of kind of like if then scenarios here, I think, and kind of interdependencies. But if there was some way for us to communicate that we would like there to be as much EV parking accommodated as reasonably possible given parking lot disturbances or something like that, I would support that.
My instinct in that circumstance is actually to let the variance process play out. I think short of like, I mean, it's possible that you could add a condition that says conditioned upon a variance not to exceed something. But I think, again, that decision is the Zoning Board of Appeals. I guess my advice to the Planning Commission would be either to acknowledge that they are presenting a plan that is shy of the standards and recognizing that they will have to be successful to the Zoning Board of Appeals in order to be able to build this plan or a version of it. Alternatively, I would say that your direction to them would be, no, this is appropriate given the scale of the parking lot, impact, and the like. It should fully comply with our ordinance. That's the intention.
I guess the risk there is that that this variance is approved, and we feel that this falls far short of what could be reasonably accommodated.
But again, with all due respect to the Planning Commission's perspective, at that point, the Zoning Board of Appeals has rendered a decision, and a plan that shows compliance with that decision would be fully compliant with city ordinances at that point.
Right. Okay. It feels like a little bit of a conundrum, but I'm going to let others weigh in.
I appreciate you working through the conundrum, Commissioner Abrams, because that was clearly by inarticulateness was showing that was a similar conundrum in my head. Commissioner Dish.
I think I want to just register some discomfort around what's happening with the EV parking ordinance. And I think we need to be consistent. And it appears we've got an ordinance with a problem, and so it goes to the ZBA, and there's an impression of negotiation and give and take, and that doesn't seem quite the way that's supposed to work. So I don't know if I feel as strongly as Commissioner Gabrandel to say you should just comply, given the conditions of this site. It is compact. There's a considerable amount being dug up. There's not obstacles to the EV ready provision, really, because you don't have to dig anything up to do that. So from a sustainability perspective, it makes sense. There isn't a whole lot of concrete being disturbed, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm concerned just that we're seeing too many of these. There's too much wiggling. Obviously, I don't want to call for a moratorium on new development until we work out the EV ordinance, but I'm a little concerned. And so I don't know if the best way to deal with my concern is to say, no, please comply. We don't think it's unreasonable, or if it's just to let the variance process and us not try to influence it, just let the variance process play itself out. I'm not sure which is the better way to make this clean and principled, as opposed to fuzzy and conditional.
Mr. Leonard.
Yeah, I appreciate this. And so I just want to add, from staff's perspective, we've presented you a recommendation that we would advise letting the Zoning Board of Appeal process play out. But I fully acknowledge, I totally agree with Commissioner Dish, your comments, and during reports, Commissioner Mills commented that we were looking at some aspects of the parking ordinance, trying to right size, right apply, find the right triggers for EV parking is part of that proposed. So I just want to confirm that I hear your concerns. I think others on the commission have shared those concerns. So I do think we have some work to do as it relates to those standards. Given that, I think that approaching it in this way is perhaps imperfect, but it is consistent with the way that we have addressed it with some of the other recent petitions.
Commissioner Lee.
Thank you. I just want to second Commissioner Dish's comment that your consistency seems to be pretty key here, especially since we've had churches with a very similar request. For our feedback and just edification for the petitioner, what drove that decision just to try and seek a variance? I just want to flat out ask what's the feedback and what was it cost? I'm just trying to get an understanding of what drove it. So that's a question for the petitioner.
I'd be glad to answer it first, and then maybe the Building Expansion Committee may want to add to what I have to say. But I know that we looked at the amount of time that people spend at the church, and we looked at how many full-time employees are there, and we took that into account as to who would actually drive a car and plug in long enough to charge. So I think a church is a kind of a different animal than residents or an office. Sure, yeah. So a shopping mall, even shopping mall, restaurant, church. You normally go when you're there for an hour, 2 at the max, maybe if there's a social gathering as well. So that's what we were looking at. And of course, cost comes into it. They're expensive, and then they need to be maintained as well. So those were the 2 large reasons why we felt that a variance should be requested.
Yeah, if I may just to add a little bit, I think Mr. Dickerson summed up our logic pretty well, because on average for our people to attend church, they go to church twice a week, maybe one on fellowship night, one during Sunday morning. They go there, probably spend no more than 2 hours. And for the EV parking that city require us for the class 2, it would take 4 to 6 hours to charge a car. And so we just don't, we recognize City of Ann Arbor's intention to be carbon neutral, and I really think that's a great idea. But for a church facility to put all those infrastructure for that kind of utilization, we just don't think that's a very proper. And then you have a long-term cost, maintenance and all that. We might end up spend more energy to maintain those charging stations than utilize them. So I think that's the fundamental reason that we are seeking for the ZBA.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that feedback. As I said before, I think consistency and not trying to be spurious about our decisions is probably critical here. So I'll be in favor of this, essentially kind of in a as-is fashion. But I do want to say we as a board should remain consistent in our decision-making. So, but thank you for the feedback. That's very helpful. And I think we probably need to take a more careful look at the EV ordinance as a whole, based on uses and making sure that it's not a one-size-fits-all. So thank you.
Other comments or questions about the petition? Commissioner Weich.
Sorry, I'm still stuck. I've been reading UDC and so forth, trying to get my head around this. Thank you, Brett. I know you're excited by that. So the two questions, there are questions. Question number one, if the church needs to expand their seating capacity without changing the footprint of the building, that would be a building code, but it would be a violation of the special exemption use. And so then how does that get resolved?
They would need a modification to the special exception use.
And that would come back to the Planning Commission to approve, which would require a new site plan.
But, I guess one question for the petitioner and the team is, I guess I don't know what that 240 size is, if that anticipates any future growth or if that is the maximum capacity now. So that's one question, but then I would, if the Planning Commission is coming at it from a perspective of you want to provide more flexibility to them in the future without that step, yeah. I would say, given the conversation here about the parking variance, in a way, it's pretty flexible to alter that number here at the table. Then the corresponding variance has to change. It might increase the ask of variance, which I would say could have an impact on the Zoning Board of Appeals, that minimum required set same standard. But I would just say that I don't know that there's a downside at this point if you wanted to increase it, if they didn't have any sort of growth projection within that, because the variance could follow. But they would have to be connected, because right now, unless parking and minimums are eliminated at some future date, we do have that nexus at this point.
Because really the seating capacity is related to the parking. It's not actually related to the site. They could put 500 people inside that footprint, but because we expect those 500 people to come in 500 cars, that is the restriction. And just honestly, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, just for all intents and purposes. And I wish we could approve this without the maximum of the seating, because if they exceed the seating capacity, then it incurs additional charges or fees for them to come into compliance. That is my agenda, is to just say, if there's some way for us to get rid of that part while they stay in compliance with the UDC, so that they don't have to come back to this table when they get to 300 and say, because people could arrive by foot, they can arrive by car, they could come via a lift. Like, I don't even want to get into the EV conversation, because I feel like that constrains us to using a car as the infrastructure. And I think that's bad. I would say, let's not put that permanent infrastructure in place. Let's find a way for people to be able to treat this neighborhood net good, which is how they get this special exception use, as a neighborhood net good. There are thousands of residents who could walk here. And now we're saying, because we only expect you to drive, you've got to tick all these boxes. And I know we're in the midst of all this change right now, but they're at the table, and I don't want them to come back to the table at a cost of $10,000 a time that they have to come to the table. And I know that's not the actual cost, so don't get stuck there. Thank you, Commissioner Mills, or Chairman Muir.
I guess if maybe the petitioner could address, where did that number come from? Do you have a growth factor in that from sort of your current occupancy plans?
Yes, the 240 is expecting future growth. Right now, our sanctuary capacity is at 138, if I'm not mistaken, and that's within the 160 SU. And for the foreseeable future, we are not planning to increase or expand our sanctuary. But as we are building this this second building, we do foresee that maybe in the future we could grow a little bit. So that's why and also I appreciate Commissioner Witch think us through that. That's also a city planner recommendation for us to foresee the future growth and increase SEU at this moment. So the 240 is already factoring in the future growth. Yeah.
Just if parking minimums are removed as our transportation plan supports, then you will see less of those limitations in the future because that nexus has been sort of broken, or that, not nexus, the connection between parking and occupancy has been broken. So you will see less of that.
Just following in on that, if we were to strike right now any limitation on capacity, so it's unlimited capacity, which means they would be required to provide a multiple of unlimited parking. I mean, is that the reason that we have to provide a cap? Is providing the cap just to calculate the parking?
Because that's a code requirement that we have to measure and evaluate this plan against. So that's why we've picked that number, so we can measure it against a standard. It's not meeting it. That gives us a variance standard that they could potentially seek to apply for, or provide it through a permanent easement elsewhere, or develop that additional parking on site. So the short answer is yes, because without that standard establishing the requirement, we can't conclude that the site plan meets our UDC requirements.
Further indication of why the stuff that we're doing in ORC and dealing with this, both the EV side and the parking minimums, is super urgent, important. Commissioner Clark, then Commissioner Gibrandel.
Yeah, Commissioner Weich had some really interesting points that I just would like to explore in the long term. And, innovative things that they could potentially be doing, like running shuttles to where maybe their communities might have a majority of residents, just all sorts of things. And I just wanted to back up that I thought that Commissioner Weich made some really outstanding kind of bigger picture and questions, and that was really helpful this discussion.
Commissioner Gibrandel.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and this is something that Commissioner Sauvé probably knows more about than me, but I mean, there are other limitations on the buildings. We can't just put 1,000 people in. I mean, there's fire code, there's all kinds of things. It's not as wide open as, it's not only parking people. There's numbers of bathrooms, there's all kinds of things. So don't quite make such a direct connection with that. It's not only that. There are all kinds of other things that have an impact on that too. Clearly, that's the main thing that we govern in terms of what we can control. But there's all kinds of other things that would come into play to limit that. We can't just have 1,000 people in there without there being serious fire hazard, going on and things like that, I would imagine. I think I don't know, I don't have the ordinance in my head enough to understand the kind of assembly use that is here and how that relates to what our kind of triggers are for numbers. I think it's a compelling argument about a church and just the amount of time that people spend there and the likelihood of them charging. And I think that's a really good point. I don't know enough. I just don't remember enough about how the ordinance is structured. Clearly, I think there needs to be some fine tuning with some of that, because I think that's a compelling argument. But I also feel like, a lot of people do drive, and we can't just throw out this whole thing that we've got. And I feel like some of this, I think that, again, it's pretty low hanging fruit to run some PVC pipe along that southeast side and make it for the future able to let that happen. And again, we can have, the ones that are EV ready compared to EV capable, to all those kinds of things. I mean, clearly the ones that you're building out the whole infrastructure for, that's a really expensive part, and that's a maintenance part. But I feel like we should just be careful about saying, oh, no big deal, let's just put in 4 spots, and this is our chance, people. We're not going to go back, I mean, and this is it. We're really trying to, if anything, there's so few areas that we actually have any control as a planning commission, and this is one of them. And I just feel like we shouldn't just completely toss it out with this. I feel like it needs to be fine-tuned. I also completely understand the argument of, you know, let's be consistent and things like that. And I would hope that the ZBA can right-size this and understand it. I don't know that, again, whether it's negotiation or not, but from the kind of constructability side of it, I would love to see some spots that are dedicated and a whole bunch of spots that would be able to be converted for the future, while they're ripping the place up and putting down conduit and sticking underneath that whole line of sidewalk that they've got, and making it capable of that for the future. So that's kind of my sense, is that it gets right-sized for the actual staff that are there, the people that are really spending time there and thinking about it that way, but making the kind of easy, really cheap, frankly, like putting in the conduit so that it can happen for the future. So that's kind of where I am right now. Again, it sounds like we don't have a ton of, if there's any, again, we don't have any dual appointment right now between Planning Commission and ZBA, which is part of where these things, like, we would want that to be translated. I don't know how, you know, I don't know if they read our reports or not, you know, in terms of that stuff. But I guess that's kind of where I'm landing right now, is right sizing it for the use that's there in terms of the permanent spots that are actively available, and then doing the kind of, while the place is ripped up, the easy conduit that makes it possible for the future. That's where I am right now with me, and really pretty much just along that southeast side. And I think that would make me feel comfortable within the jurisdiction that we have. So.
Mr. Leonard, and then Commissioner Clark.
Yeah. Just absent a duly appointed member, I just want to be clear, Mr. Kowalski will be following this petition to the Zoning Board of Appeals, so he will be able to bring the dialogue that happens here even without that. And I would, you know, and I would say we can also sort of calling the shot a little bit. Me and Mr. Kowalski can follow up with the petitioners in advance of that Zoning Board of Appeals application and explore some of these ideas with them as well. And you know, I think the petitioner is hearing this conversation from the Planning Commission. We certainly are as well. We can explore with them how we can potentially push that their current plan. Maybe it is, you know, really focusing more on the infrastructure, so it's future proofing that. So we can work with them to try to, you know, we can work with them in advance of it appearing to the Zoning Board of Appeals to right sizes it to the best way we can from an agreeable nature between the petitioner and us as staff. So, and I, based on the comments I've heard, it seems like they'd be really open to sort of that dialogue. So,
Mr. Kowalski, you wanted to jump in here too?
Yeah, sorry, I jumped ahead of Commissioner Clark. Sorry about that. I just wanted to add on to that, what Mr. Leonard said regarding, we do, you know, I do construct a new staff report that does go to the ZBA for petitions like this that are site plan related. I will be the one writing that report, just like I did for the Grace Bible petition. So you can, I mean, and if you want to see some of what, you know, we can go back and look at that one as well. So we do relay these concerns, just like we did for Grace Bible. You can see a lot of the Planning Commissioner, we had the notations in there, and, you know, these concerns were mentioned here. So I just wanted to add to that there is that separate report. But in addition, we do also, you know, include the planning staff report, but more importantly, the concerns that we hear here tonight are summarized within that report.
Commissioner Clark.
So I'll be really brief. I just want to make sure that, like, you know, I feel like the church probably knows their constituents better than anybody else, and they probably will know their means of transit to and from. And I want to be sure that we're not imposing our kind of views about what we think the future is going to be like with electrical vehicles, and that does kind of seem like the church's business to handle in the future. I guess it's like a long meeting, so I might not be expressing myself perfectly clearly here, but I just want to make sure that we're kind of considering these things on a more holistic level, maybe taking these conversations onto like, like we've mentioned a few times, revisiting these policies and maybe even looking at things like electric bike charging and stuff like that, which in an area like this where there's a lot of dense housing, I could see the electric bikes being a much more reasonable expectation. And again, that's a bigger picture policy issue, but I feel like this, when it comes down to it, this site, they know their constituents, they're going to be the ones bearing the cost in the future if they decide that they do want to install these electric vehicle parkings. And I don't think it's really up to us to like be prescriptive on that. When it's, they know their constituents, they know their population. There's a good chance that people aren't driving just one person per car. There's all sorts of considerations. A lot of people in their church might not even have cars. So I want to make sure that we're really considering these things, and the special exception to me seems fairly reasonable at this stage, but that's just my view.
Any other comments? Mr. Leonard, I think we're ready for a roll call vote, and we can take all three: site plan,
Yeah.
landscape modification, special exception together.
That is the clarification I was hoping for. Commissioner Dish,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Weich,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibrandel,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauve,
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yes.
Motion's carried unanimously.
Very good. All right, good luck at ZBA and with City Council.
Thank you very much.
All right. Item 9A in our other business is the approval of the notice of intent to plan for an update to the City of Ann Arbor Parks and Recreation Open Space Plan. We call that the PROS plan. Before, I guess we don't have a public hearing on this, so I just effectively introduced it, and I think we move it, and then we will have discussion. Mr. Leonard, there's no you're not giving a presentation.
No. You covered it. This is the first step in an update to the city's comprehensive plan. The PROS plan sort of is dual purpose. It is typically adopted as a component of our comprehensive plan. It also provides a more focused, obviously, attention to our park system. And it also meets some requirements for potential eligibility for different state funding opportunities and the like. So it is a routine process. I think it's every 5 years, 4 or 5 years, 5 years maybe. Now that I think it happened about the same time I started with the city. And this, while frankly the Parks and Recreation Department will be leading most of that work, because it is adopted as a comprehensive plan, we take the first step and we notify adjacent jurisdictions that, hey, we are intending to update our Parks and Recreation Open Space Plan. If you're interested in it, let us know. We will keep you apprised of progress and status and opportunities for engagement. And then you may recall, as recently done with the transportation plan, at the tail end of that process, we share the plan with those same jurisdictions saying this is what we came up with. If you have any comments, please share them before it is ultimately adopted.
All right. If there are questions about that, once we've moved it, we can have that discussion. But I appreciate that introduction. Can we move? Would Commissioner please move this? Moved by Commissioner Dish, seconded by Commissioner Weich. So now if you have questions or want to discuss the notice of intent to plan, this is the time.
I just have a small correction, which is that the second paragraph is a repeat sentence of the second sentence of the first paragraph.
Sorry, we'll correct
I see that second sentence. I noticed that actually while I was reading through this during the meeting.
And since I wrote
Caught
this
that.
letter, I have to make sure we catch that. Thank you. That's all.
Make sure you don't have any typos, Commissioner Abrams.
Yeah, exactly.
Secretary Abrams.
My reputation on the line.
Sorry, your secretarial staff let you down, Secretary.
Any other discussion? All right. I think we can just do a voice vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes or raise a hand. Those are all of the hands. The motion carries. So next is revisions to our, this is 9B, revisions to the Planning Commission meeting calendar. Mr. Leonard, you want to walk us through the revisions?
Yeah, this is an update to our schedule. There are 3 changes. Unless you don't get through this, you have gotten through all your business. We have no public hearing scheduled for the December 21st meeting, so this schedule would have the impact of canceling that meeting. It also makes 2 adjustments to meetings in 2022. The first adjusts the meeting from 118 to 121 because meetings that week are being moved back for the Martin Luther King holiday. And then there is a May special election on May 4th. So we are moving to May 5th to not overlap any election.
Are you sure it's 121? That's a Friday.
I was just looking up the very same thing. I kind of think it's 20.
Sorry, hold on.
It says 20 in the schedule that we were given.
Yes, I'm sorry. I just put 21 in my notes. It should be the 20th Thursday.
And then I'm sorry, the other one, I was so stuck on the Friday that
It is being moved for the standard May election in the event that there is a special election in May. Then that would be offset. I don't honestly know if there is one, but we're accommodating for it.
Okay.
The council meeting has been moved for it, so we are also moving.
So the first is a move to a Thursday. The second is a move to a Wednesday.
That's correct.
Yeah. All right.
And the third is a cancellation.
Great. Thank you for introducing that. Can we move it and then we can ask if there are any other questions? Moved by Commissioner Hammerschmidt, seconded by Commissioner Lee. Any other discussion of this or clarifications? All right, all those in favor of the amended meeting calendar, please raise your hand. That's everybody.
I'm sorry, who moved and seconded that? I missed my note.
Hammerschmidt and Lee.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Okay, thank you. Next is item 10, audience participation. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about any item of interest. If you wish to address the Planning Commission at this time, please press *9 if you're listening by phone, or use the raised hand feature if you're viewing through the web link. For phone access, our number is 877-853-5247, and our meeting ID is 977-6634-1226. Mr. Leonard will call on those who've raised their hand, calling on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number or by the name that is available if you are joining through the web link. And I'm going to stretch this out since there's no one joining us right now, but we do have the TV delay. Also to say that when we are in person, I will let my mind forget this phone number because it's the same, blessedly, it's the same one all the time.
Hopefully not, because we are one of 2 bodies, along with City Council, who are going to be piloting the ability for the public to still participate remotely, even though all of you will be in person.
That is right. So we will continue to invite people to the podium and also to invite people to call in.
Yep.
Great. Thank you for reminding me.
Nobody's calling in, no speakers.
No speakers. Okay, so we'll move on to item 11, which is commission proposed business. Is there any? Commissioner White.
Just a quick question about our eventual move into the council chamber, given that I never started in the council chamber. Where do we ask the questions? How does parking happen if I'm not biking? What's the ventilation situation going to be like? And are we still under a mask mandate? And then I also wanted to apologize to you, Chair Mills, for using the wrong honorific when I was cutting myself off. So I apologize for that improper use of your honorific.
I'm super, you can be very informal. I appreciate that.
That's okay. Honorifics matter. You all have spent a lot of time achieving the things you have achieved, and I want to use the right ones, and I apologize that I did not.
I can take a stab at that. If you do not ride your bike or take the bus, thank you for your contributions to our parking system.
So that means we're paying for our own parking?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But
it's free
7,
after
so
6.
it'll be free. Okay.
Yeah.
If you can find it, it's the finding the street parking.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you where I used to park.
As far as ventilation, I'll have to follow up with you. I am not aware of specific changes to City Hall's ventilation system, but they have recently actually cleaned out the ventilation of the duct system, which my understanding had not been done for some time. So that work is either completed or scheduled to be completed shortly. I'm happy to follow up with any more details if I can learn about that. Anybody in City Hall must be masked, whether you are staff, public, boards, commissions, and the like. I think at this point, most of you may have received a communication from boards and commissions that in-person boards and commissions also have to demonstrate their vaccine status or seek an exemption from the city. So if you haven't followed up on that process, please make sure you do that before our January meetings as well. I guess out of all that, I don't have the best answer to the ventilation system, but I'll see what I can provide as a follow-up.
If you could just ask about air filters, if that is a possibility as well, so that we can just bring that in, especially because we'll have the public addressing the commission. And even though people will be wearing masks, I don't know if there's enforcement for masking, because some people wear their masks as a chin guard and not over their nose and mouth. So I don't know how that's going to be managed.
Sure, and I would also say, because you haven't had in-person meetings, there's a fair amount of physical separation as well between the public and the commission at meetings, but
COVID is airborne. It's like smoke. So once it's in a space, it's in a space. So it's not about droplets or distance. It's really about what's in the air. So those are my questions. So thank you.
I'll find out on that.
I see you, Commissioner Clark, but while I'm thinking of it, if this is part of my duties of mask enforcement, some pointers on how that works. I am in front of a classroom. I've never had to enforce a mask requirement because everybody has been in compliance, but I welcome thoughts on how that is proceeding. Commissioner Clark.
This is a question. I don't know if we'll have like an answer immediately, but I'm just curious if there's any accommodations for hearing. I sometimes rely on watching people's like reading whatever to get a full, understanding what they're saying. And I was just hoping that there might be, I don't know how like captioning could work, or like, so like later on I can go and review and see, but I'm just worried about my ability to like follow along. So I don't know, it's a tricky question, and so I'm not expecting like a miracle answer or whatever. It's just something to throw on the radar.
Yeah, captioning is done for city meetings. You're finding the best way for you to access that while you are at the dais. I don't know that answer. Let me explore that and figure out the best way, but the service is there. Like I said, though, I don't know the best way to get that to you. At worst, it might be you utilizing a personal laptop and just sort of keeping the live feed up on your laptop and with that caption service. But there is a delay there, as Commissioner Mills is often referred to. So that could be challenging as well. But let me explore that as well, the best way to get that service to you.
And even like a microphone inside the mast or something could even help a bit, but just out of curiosity, I know that's a tricky one, so.
Yeah, and microphones are used in the council chambers. So yeah, so at a minimum, sometimes we all, commissioners and myself, have to be reminded to actually make sure they're speaking close to them. So that might help, but I'll see also how I can explore maybe the best way to get that closed captioning service to your spot on the dais.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lee.
Just really quick, I just want to say I can't wait to actually meet you guys in person. So like master on that. So I'm really looking forward to it. I won't be there on the 4th. I noted I'll be out of state. I think I sent you guys an email, but I just can't wait to actually meet you all in person. So sorry, silly commissioner business, but that's about it. So
we'll see how tall everybody is. Like, this is the thing that is, yeah. Anything else about meeting in person? Because the next time, next week we will gather together in a for our working session, but after that, the next time that we will all be together will be in person.
Yeah, and you know, we will be advertising the meeting much like we traditionally did. We will be providing the virtual comment option at this point just for our public participation. At this point, we are not extending that to staff or petitioners yet. We could explore that in the future, but that's where we're starting, just with public participation. I will say that we are there. I think there will be a learning curve. I think IT at the city has done a great job in sort of preparing us for this. We will probably be noticing that if you want to make sure that you have access to provide public comment, providing comments in writing or attending the meeting is probably the most surefire way, because there could be technical difficulties. But so I just want to acknowledge that we will be trying to qualify that, but we are fully intending to get this successful as quickly and operational as possible. So it's just to say, I'm sure there will be some adjustments as we learn sort of back and forth to in-person and going to a virtual comment. And at this point, I think it's going to show up in audio in the room, and you're only going to see it on the televisions in the back of the room. So bear with us as we fine tune this, and you as the Planning Commission and the City Council are the other, you are going to be the sort of guinea pigs to see what application this might have for other boards and commissions going.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Are we intending for working sessions and ORC to also be in person, like the basement conference room?
Yeah, and I think so. I've just actually recently had this conversation with the attorney's office, and they recommend that the Planning Commission and all of its pertinent committees should be in person, because those actions could be leading to. I think when we're talking about the working session and the ORC in the basement conference room, I think it is going to be a little bit different dynamic. I think that is going to be probably starting with some adjustment just to how we set up physically for the commission. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it, but I think we'll probably start sort of a more separate, but that is such a smaller room. Seeing what the comfort level, what comfort we have or concerns we have about that. That I think is frankly going to be a little bit more challenging from a physical distance, but that's also the reason we meet there, is because the nature of those meetings, both ORC and the working session, lend themselves to a little bit more collaborative and frankly intimate kind of dialogue. So they will be in person, and I think it's going to be sort of on us to sort of figure out our comfort level with that arrangement.
I wasn't even thinking about that, but thank you. I was actually more thinking like we have public comment at those as well. Are we going to try to figure out how to Or are people gonna have to like physically come? And then that would probably make me slightly uncomfortable because that is your people you're cramming into that room.
Yeah, that will probably require people to physically come, because the way we're going to be able to accommodate virtual comments is through some work of CTN and sort of bringing that feed into the room. At this point, I don't know that we'll have the ability to do that in the conference rooms just through the computer versus the CTN feed. So I think that will be a challenge. We're going to have to be really cognizant of separation, masking in those circumstances, and the like.
Yeah, this will be an interesting test.
And I would say ultimately, if we decide that we're not uncomfortable with that, what we might have to do is explore alternative meeting times where, as it is, we were sort of balancing, for example, ICPOC and ORC meet at the same time, and both were sort of interested in using the basement room. We work with them to sort of move them to the council chambers because it's more of a public facing meeting, it's televised and the like. But at some point, we're going to have to find our comfort with the ORC, for example, and being in that smaller room. And if we're not, for some reason, we might have to explore alternative locations to accommodate that.
Commissioner Weich?
Just a real quick one. Can we bring our personal laptops to use at the dais, or? Okay.
Yeah, most people do. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, the only the screens at the dais are actually sort of the public feed, and they're distorted for some reason. So like all the site plans end up stretched oddly. So most people just use their laptop.
Other commission proposed business. I just want to note that I'm hoping, Mr. Leonard, that in the next time ORC meets or talks about parking, that we are reminded of the things that came up tonight. Less important about kind of the minimum. I think that is not at all in conflict with kind of the things that we had been discussing, but I think ideas about edits to the EV ordinance specifically, just for everybody's benefit. One of the things that the last ORC was discussing whether we should not have 3 categories, whether installed and kind of capable, like kind of get rid of the ready category might go away. So kind of simplification, but also what I heard was, what are the multipliers according to kind of how long people expect to be there. If we can just carry those along. And just for everybody's benefit too, like to remind people right now, like this is going to become less relevant if council actually passes the thing that passed at first reading I think that you said it was last night, Councilmember Dish, because right now they only comply with the EV ordinance if the site plan goes to city council for approval, and there's very few things that will go on to city council for approval in the new situation other than rezonings. Is that fair? So there's
well, that's another reason why we've got to
do something,
because it lost its trigger, like the stormwater lost its trigger. So
exactly. Somebody jumped in along the way. Commissioner Abrams? No? Okay.
It's not important.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Item 12 is adjournment. All moved by Commissioner Abrams, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. All in favor, please say aye or raise a hand. That's everybody's hands. Good night.
All right, thank you all.